Entire family blocked me off after my wife cheated on me with my cousin and had a baby. My whole family kept it secret while I struggled to become successful. Now they want me back. So there's a lot of context here. Kindly bear with me as I explain this whole situation to my family right now. I'm 44, male, and have been married for 10 years and have been with my wife, 41F, for 13 years. We also have an 8-year-old son and we are quite happy with our lives. However, this is not my first marriage. I got married at 22, but unfortunately, that marriage ended in divorce within 3 years for reasons that I'm still not aware of. My ex-wife, let's call her Amy, had been with me since we were in middle school. We were pretty much childhood sweethearts, and as soon as we graduated college and had decent jobs, we decided to get married. Things were fine for the first couple of years, but after that, for some reason, stuff started to get weird between us. I tried my very best to keep the spark alive, but after that point, I started to feel like she was not interested at all. I did everything in my power to get her back, but a couple of weeks before our 3rd marriage anniversary, she decided to hand me divorce papers and told me that she was done. I wanted to work on our marriage. I just wanted one reason why we had to give up after being together for so long, but she couldn't give me any reasons apart from the fact that she was just not in love with me anymore. I was really upset, but I couldn't do anything about it, so I decided to go through with it since I had no other option, and I did not want to make her even more unhappy by forcing her to stay with me and dragging out the divorce. We didn't have a lot of joint assets together, so it was a relatively straightforward process, and after that, I did not see her again. I heard from a couple of friends that after the divorce was finalized, she moved cities and cut everybody off. This is normal, but what was really strange was that even my family stopped speaking to me around the time of the divorce. They should have been supportive of me when I was going through something so difficult, but instead, they started distancing themselves from me. After the divorce was finalized, I tried really hard to keep in touch with them, but I realized that I had been blocked everywhere. I even tried to go visit them a couple of times, but neither did my parents ever open the door to me, nor did my sister. It was all very strange, and I was already going through a tough time, so it really hit me hard. For a couple of years after the divorce, I couldn't even bring myself to do anything and ended up quitting my job and sitting at home unemployed for a few months. But I'm incredibly lucky that even in such difficult times, I had friends by my side, who decided to motivate me to do better and try to move on. My family was never there for me after the divorce, so my friends took care of me, and eventually, I decided to start my own restaurant. It had always been my dream, but I had decided to wait to save up enough money since I also had to think about Amy while we were married. However, now that we had gotten divorced, I decided that I would go through with it on my own, and I also decided to use the name that my parents had suggested for the restaurant. With the help of my friends, I reached out to a couple of investors, got them on board, started building a business model, and within a few years, I started my first restaurant. It took me almost 4 years to get back on my feet after the divorce, and 2 years after that, I met my wife. We met through friends at a party and she told me that she loved my restaurant, so that's how we got to talking. After 3 years of dating, I decided to finally give love another chance and asked her to marry me, and now 10 years later, here we are with our son. It's not just my personal life that has improved over the past couple of years, but also my professional life since I have done reasonably well in my career. It all started with a restaurant, but then, we slowly began to expand, thanks to the success of the first restaurant. Currently, I am the CEO of my own hospitality group, and we own a semi-popular chain of restaurants and hotels, which we are currently planning to expand even more, so we become more popular outside of the state as well. It has been an uphill battle, but I have worked really hard to get where I am, and that's why, when I was asked to sit for an interview recently, I thought that it was a sign that I had really made it. So I agreed, but I honestly had no idea that it would lead to such a storm in my life, because my family decided to come back and reach out to me after having watched that interview on the news. The channel that had picked it up was a moderately popular one, so I hadn't really expected my family to have watched it, and even if I had, I did not expect them to show up at my office. It's not really private information where my workplace is, so it must have been quite easy for them to find me, but anyway, it was still quite inappropriate for them to show up at my workplace and demand to see me during work hours. Unfortunately, 3 days back, that's exactly what they did, and it was quite weird for me to see them after so long. When they showed up, I was working, but the receptionist told me that my family was waiting outside. At first, I thought that it was my wife and my son that she was talking about, which would have been weird because my wife was at work, and my son was at school. But then, she clarified and told me that it was my parents and sister who were there to see me. It was then that I started finding it difficult to process what was going on, and so, I told the receptionist that I would see them later, but for now, they would have to be told to leave. But of course, they did not leave and started throwing a tantrum, so I had to intervene because I did not want security to throw them out of the building before I got a chance to speak to them and find out what on earth was happening. So I went to see them in the lobby, and as soon as they saw me, they started acting like nothing had changed since the last time that I saw them, which was almost 20 years ago. They literally started fawning over me instantly, telling me how great it was that I had become successful enough to make it to the news and how inspiring my story was. It felt very weird to hear them say that because since they were my family, they actually should have been part of that story, and I kept trying to brush it off by telling them that I had to go back to work, but then, they started talking about how they had seen my family as well. There was a part in my interview, where I talked about my wife and son and how great they had been throughout my journey, and the channel had put together a couple of our family photos, so I'm guessing that's what they were referring to. And they started telling me that they really wanted to meet my wife and their grandson as soon as possible because they had spent a really long time away from all of us. At that point, they started telling me that I had not put in enough of an effort to get in touch with them after the divorce and that I should have tried harder. Then, I realized that I might finally be able to find out what exactly had gone back then, so I decided to let them talk instead of telling them to leave, and even took a seat in the lobby with them, so I could get to the bottom of what had happened those years ago, just so that I would get some closure. And while they were talking, I discovered the real reason that Amy had decided to get a divorce from me, and why exactly my family had abandoned me after that. You guys might have figured it out by now, but yeah, Amy had been cheating on me, and I had never had a clue because my parents had been helping her cover it up all along. Don't judge them too quickly, though, since they had their reasons. At least, according to them, these were valid reasons to help their daughter-in-law cheat on their son. Apparently, the person that Amy was having an affair with was my cousin, my dad's older brother's son. When they finally told me about that, everything seemed to fall into place almost immediately: why they had helped her out, why I hadn't been invited to any family events in the past 20 years, why I had been completely cast aside for no fault of my own. My cousin, let's call him Carl, was a spoiled, entitled brat, and I had always hated him. But unfortunately, because his mother had passed away when he was just 6 months old, his dad and the rest of the family seemed to think that he should get a free pass for everything that he did. So, throughout his entire life, nobody had told him how to behave, and he always got away with everything. It did not help that my uncle was my dad's boss since he had started the family business, and my dad had joined him later. And after our marriage, since Carl had decided that he wanted to be with Amy, and she had also wanted the same thing, my family had no other choice but to help them out, because they couldn't risk my uncle's anger, of course. But putting the relationship with me at risk was something easily doable, and so that's what they did. They told me that after the divorce, my uncle made it very clear that he didn't want anybody from the family to have any contact with me at all, including my parents and sister. Apparently, they had tried to protest, but then, Amy had announced that she was pregnant with my kid, and if they ever wanted to have any contact with their grandkid, they would have to cut me off. By the way, I was never notified of the fact that Amy was pregnant when she had filed for a divorce, and another time, she hadn't been showing either, so I couldn't have guessed. Neither had she been staying with me, since she had moved out long before the divorce was finalized, so I had no idea that I had become a father long before my son was born, and apparently, I have a daughter who is almost 20 now but has never even known me and thinks that Carl is her real father. Anyway, this was whatever my parents told me about what had really happened all those years ago, and I could hardly begin to process any of that at that moment because I felt like I was being told a story, and I had to pinch myself to actually realize that this was my reality. My family had basically just cut me off in favor of having a relationship with their grandchild and job security, or so they believed. But in my opinion, they had cut me off because they were cowards and nothing else. They could have easily come to me with the truth and let me deal with the situation, but they chose to be afraid of my dad's brother, as if he could actually do any harm to them other than firing my father from the business, and even then, my dad could have easily retaliated by filing a lawsuit. As for never telling me about Amy's pregnancy, and the fact that I have a daughter, I literally cannot think of any excuse for that. For 20 whole years, they had sat on this and never spoken up until they found out that I was doing well in life, and now, all of a sudden, they were feeling really sorry about everything and wanted to make it up to me. Unfortunately for them, I could see through their act, and as soon as they were done telling me everything, I told them that I needed them to leave because whatever they had just said to me, I couldn't find it in me to forgive them at the moment. I tried to be civil to them because after all, we were sitting in the lobby of my workplace and I did not want to throw a tantrum. But of course, I couldn't count on them to behave the same way, and when I said that I wanted them to leave, they immediately started whining about it and told me that I needed to think about where they were coming from, and how difficult the situation had been for them as well. I told them that I knew for a fact that they had only decided to reach out to me now, simply because I was successful, and they wanted a piece of that, but they started denying it vehemently, and my sister even went to the extent of saying that I owed my success to them in the first place. By that, she obviously meant that I had used the name that they had suggested for my restaurant all those years ago when it was still a dream that I had. I thought it was really bold of her to make a claim like that, given the fact that neither had had any of their support throughout all of these years and had done everything on my own with help from my friends, but not them. Just having suggested a name did not make them worthy enough to credit my success to themselves, and it was such a ridiculous idea that I ended up laughing at her, and I told her that if she and her parents did not leave that very instant, I would have them thrown out of the building. So they immediately started arguing with me, telling me that they were not going anywhere until we had cleared the air between us, but honestly, I was just not interested, so I did exactly what I had told them I would do. I had them thrown out of the building by security. They were naturally very upset while they were being thrown out and kept trying to tell me that they had no choice and stuff, but I don't buy that. They did have a choice, they just made the wrong one, and now they're gonna have to face the consequences for it. It hasn't been difficult for them to live for the past 20 years without having seen me and my family. I'm sure they can manage it in the future as well. Anyway, it has been 3 days since then, and they haven't stopped trying to contact me ever since. They have been texting me on social media, sending me emails at my work address, and have even been showing up at my office, but haven't had the guts to come back inside yet. There has been a definite change in their attitude because now, all they are doing is trying to apologize to me. All their messages are just full of apologies, and even when I see them standing outside my workplace, they look really upset and they wait for me to stop for them, but I just drive by and ignore them. It has gotten to a point where I almost feel bad for them, to be honest. I have spoken to my wife about this because regardless of what I decide to do about my family, we still have to think about my daughter, who I didn't even know existed until a couple of days back. We have been going back and forth on that since neither of us really knows if we should trace her and try to reach out to her yet or not. And then, on top of that, we also have a family to deal with because I don't think they're gonna go anywhere until they get another chance to speak to me. My wife thinks that just for the sake of at least attempting to clear things out, maybe I should just speak to them, invite them home and let us all talk it out, so at least we can get all the toxicity out of the way because this is not good for my emotional health, but I personally have no interest in doing anything like that. I just want to keep ignoring them until they go away on their own. Mostly because I don't have the capacity to deal with them right now, especially after everything that I have found out and whatever I'm dealing with at the moment. So we are having a lot of trouble, trying to figure out what to do, and how to deal with this. And I want to ask, Ida for not wanting to give my parents a chance to speak to me after 20 years of no contact? Update 1. So it has been a week and 3 days since I posted here and my wife and I have decided that we are going to continue to ignore my family. Thankfully, for the past couple of days, they haven't been showing up at my workplace, probably because they got tired of it. Or maybe they got intimidated by the security, but for whatever reason, they haven't been showing up and I'm very relieved. Once they stopped showing up, I found it much easier to stop thinking about them. So I guess it was just their faces that were making me feel bad about whatever I was doing. However, now I don't feel guilty about ignoring their messages anymore. They can keep apologizing all they want, but it's not going to change anything because the fact of the matter is that they have failed me as a family and no amount of apologizing is ever going to make that right again. They have still continued to send messages to me from various accounts and email addresses, and at this point, I'm not even bothering to block them anymore because what's the point? They're just gonna create new ones to try and apologize to me, and I'm gonna just keep ignoring all of it. Anyway, let's see how long they can keep this up and how sorry they are about everything. Moving on to the other problem that we were dealing with, my wife and I had no idea how to deal with the situation with my daughter. We do have a name since my parents had told me her full name and where she goes to college while we were talking the other day, so we have managed to trace her. My assistant managed to find her social media accounts for me, but so far, I haven't done anything. I don't even know if it's appropriate for me to do anything, and neither do I have any idea how I'm supposed to tell her that I am her actual biological father. She is not a minor, so obviously, I can't just show up at Amy's house, demanding custody and stuff, and honestly, I would much rather not have her involved in this at all because after what I found out about her, I have lost all respect for that woman and my entire family. They are all just a bunch of spineless cowards, and I want nothing to do with them. But I can't say the same thing for my daughter because no matter who she has been raised by, she is still my flesh and blood. Anyway, if anybody has any advice on how to go ahead and talk to her about this or whether I should even be doing that or not, please let me know. Also, thank you to everybody who responded to my original post and commented on it. It was really helpful, and I'm hoping that you guys can help me out once again here now. Update 2. Hey, so after going through the comments, on my update from 3 days back, my wife and I just decided to go for it. There was no point in waiting for the right time or the right opportunity to text my daughter, we just had to rip off the band-aid and be done with it. And because she lives in a different state and we don't think that it would be the right thing to do to fly out to her, we decided to send her a message first and see how that goes. So, we reached out to her on Instagram, explained everything to her as nicely as we could, and now we are waiting for a response from her. I'm sure it's going to be really complicated to come to terms with it. It is complicated for me as well, and I don't even understand how my wife has managed to be so supportive, knowing that I'm reaching out to the long-lost daughter whom I had with my ex-wife. I'm sure it's a lot of complicated emotions for all of us, but we are trying our best and I'm really hoping that my daughter reaches back out to me because I would really love to have a relationship with her. Now, coming to my parents and what they are up to, they haven't shown up at my workplace in a really long time, and yesterday, they sent me a really long email saying that they were really sorry about everything, but they genuinely want to repair their relationship with me and they just need one chance for me. They told me that they wouldn't be reaching out to me again, but they're gonna wait for me to reach out to them instead. Honestly, I'm kind of relieved that they took the hint and realized that I really don't want to speak to them right now. I already have a lot on my plate to be dealing with at the moment. The last thing that I need is for them to create more drama. Now, I'm just hoping that they stick to what they said, and do not reach out to me again. If I feel ready or if I want to speak to them at any point, I will do so myself. However, right now, it seems very unlikely that it's going to happen anytime soon because now that I know the real reason that they hadn't spoken to me in 20 whole years, the situation has become much worse with them. I feel betrayed and hurt, and I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. At least, the one good thing that came out of this was that I found out about my daughter, and now, I really hope that she decides to give our relationship a chance. I haven't told my son about this yet, just in case she doesn't want to talk to us. I wouldn't want to give him false hope. But if things go well, he might find a sister in her, and I might be able to get to know the daughter that I never knew I had. I just have a lot of emotions right now and I'm really trying hard to keep it together. Update 3. Hi. So almost 2 weeks ago, I reached out to my daughter on social media, and I sent her a message, telling her everything about who I was and how she was related to me. After that, for 2 weeks, I waited for her to respond, and today, I finally got a text back. She didn't say much, just told me that she had spoken to her mother about me after my message and had finally found out that I was her biological father. Obviously, this had come as a shock to her because, for the past 20 years, she had believed that Carl was her biological father and had no idea that she wasn't his daughter. She had also found out the real story behind how her mother and I ended up like this and told me that she would like to meet me and my family. So we are all flying out to see her this weekend since she's not speaking to her family right now, so she doesn't have the funds to come see us. She didn't get into the details, but when she confronted Amy about the message that she had received, at first Amy tried to deny it, but then she was forced to tell her the truth. I haven't heard from Amy yet, and I really hope that she doesn't contact me because I don't want to speak to her. However, my family did break their promise immediately and started trying to talk to me as soon as they found out that I had reached out to my daughter. Apparently, my uncle was furious that I had found out about it, and naturally so because they had spent 20 years trying to make sure that I never found out so I wouldn't cause any trouble in their life. But now, I finally knew, and of course, my uncle was holding my parents responsible for all of this. My dad doesn't even work for him anymore, he has his independent business, but for some reason, he is still terrified of his older brother and has been begging me to tell my uncle or Carl or somebody that they did not have anything to do with this and that I found out on my own somehow. Even if I did do that, I think it's highly unlikely that anybody would believe it because they are the only people likely to do something like this since I haven't ever been close to most of my family, and they haven't bothered to speak to me in the past 20 years. It's funny how desperate they are acting right now, just so that they don't lose the relationship that they have with my uncle, but honestly, I don't really care. It was because of them that I did not have a relationship with my daughter for 20 years of our lives, so I think this is really the least that I can do for them. Update 4. Hello, everyone. So today, my family and I finally met my daughter. It was weird at first, and then it was really emotional, but mostly, it was just beautiful. She seems to be a really kind and good human being, which is weird because she was raised by two of the cruelest and most horrible people I know. But I guess they did a good job raising her, or maybe it's just her own innate nature, but whatever it was, she seems to be a really intelligent and mature girl. We had a long chat about how things were going with Amy and her father, and she told me that they were naturally not on board with her meeting us, but she didn't care because after she found out the truth, she simply didn't care what her parents thought. They did not have any kids after her, she is their only child, so she doesn't think that she's gonna abandon them forever, but she's definitely going to distance herself from them for a while and try to process all of this. She told me that she needs some time to start building a relationship with me as well, she just is in a very weird place mentally right now, and I totally understand. But overall, we had a really nice time, and she really seemed to get along with my wife and her half-brother as well. We had dinner together, and we found out that my parents, her grandparents, had been in touch with her all along, and she always found it weird how emotional they were about her, considering the fact that they were not her actual grandparents but her grandfather's brother's family, but now, it all makes sense why they were so attached to her. However, after everything that she has found out, she sees all of them in a different light, and so do I, so I can completely understand how she feels. Well, maybe not completely because I'm a lot older than her, and she's just 20, so she's probably finding it a lot more difficult to deal with because she has been lied to her entire life by the people she considered to be the closest to her. But anyway, both of us are gonna have to work on this, and hopefully, the future will be better. I know it has to be because we're going to try and make it the best. All I'm really happy about is that the meeting went well and my family seems to be really content after all of this, and so am I. I'm quite content with the situation as well, regardless of what my family has done or what Amy and Carl have done. What matters is that at least now, after so many years, we have a chance at making things right, and I'm gonna make the most of that chance. Lost my patience with my stepson for calling me a gold digger for marrying his father who was living off of my dime, and not correcting his son after he destroyed my car. For context, my husband Thomas and I have been together for 6 years, married for 2. He also has a 19-year-old son from his previous marriage, but unfortunately, his first wife passed away from an unexpected aneurysm about 5 years before he met me. His son, Rob, was 9 years old at the time and he took it really hard. He was a very troubled kid, and as he grew up, things only got worse. By the time I was introduced to him, he was around 13 or 14, and getting to know him was not a pleasant experience because he made it very clear to me right from the beginning that I would never be able to take the place of his mother, something that I was not even interested in doing, and that he would never accept me as part of the family. I tried to be his friend, but the kid was just determined to make sure that I gave up on the relationship and I left. I had spoken to Thomas about it as well and suggested that he send Rob to therapy so he could deal with his emotions, and he told me that they had tried everything but he just didn't seem to want to get better. After his last wife had passed away, Thomas had not even thought about dating people for a really long time, but when he had met me, he changed his mind. I was pretty much one of the first women he got serious about after his wife passed away. He had gone out on a couple of dates that year, but none of them got a second date out of him apart from me, and he had told me about it right in the beginning. Thomas has always been very upfront and honest about everything with me, and he had also told me that Rob was not going to be particularly welcoming because he is not over his mother's passing, and that's why he wanted to take it slow with me, before he introduced me to the family. So we were actually together for 1 year before he finally brought me home, and even then, Rob was very unkind to me. For the first few years, all he could do was just throw temper tantrums and be rude to me, and while initially, I would try to understand and be kind to him, eventually, I just started ignoring him because it was not worth my energy to even fight him. I had also told Thomas repeatedly to do something about his son's behavior, and Thomas would occasionally reprimand Rob, but it would be pointless because he would just go back to his usual behavior after that. And I loved Thomas truly and genuinely from the bottom of my heart, so I knew that no matter what, I wanted to make it work with him. This is why I stayed with him for almost 6 years, in spite of him constantly forgiving his son, but what happened recently was the last straw for me. 3 years back, around the time that Thomas had proposed to me and I had said yes, he had also started a new business. Unfortunately, it didn't take off, and for the past couple of years, he has been trying to make it work, but it just hasn't been going well for him financially. I let him try his luck with his business for almost 3 years because it was his passion project, but when it still didn't take off, I tried to tell him that maybe it was time to move on to better things or go back to his job because this was clearly not going well for him. I had started telling him to give up on his business and do something else recently, just a few months ago, since for the past 3 years we have been living off of my money for the most part. I've been getting worried because I can't afford to support our family on just my income, since that will leave very little for me in the future when I want to retire. So I had been trying to gently nudge Thomas in the right direction, but he was being very stubborn and he kept telling me that he just needed some more time to work on his business model and would keep coming up with excuses not to give up. I really wanted to be understanding, but it was impossible for me to keep supporting him, knowing that this was not working. So recently, we had been fighting a lot over this, and I guess at some point, his son had overheard what we were talking about, and he came to the conclusion that I was a gold digger for telling Thomas to sell off his business to any interested buyers and go back to his job so we could make more money. I found that very insulting because the one thing that I'm definitely not a gold digger, I've always been independent, and I couldn't stand the insinuation that I had been relying on my husband for money when it had actually been the other way around. I had wanted to correct Rob when he started calling me a gold digger because it had come up a few weeks ago when I had told him to do some chores and he had told me that he was not going to take orders from a gold digger with no self-respect or dignity, and when I had asked him what he meant by that because I was obviously appalled, he had explained his thought process to me. But before I could correct him, Thomas intervened and broke up the fight, and then he put me aside and told me not to tell his son anything because Rob had no idea that we had been living off of my money for so long and he wanted to preserve his image in front of his son because it would be very shameful for him to admit that he was struggling with money. As a father, it would be humiliating for him to show his son how he had fallen, and Thomas pretty much begged me not to tell him the truth, so I obliged. But I had to pay the price for it because after that day, things started getting more difficult for me since now that Rob believed that I was a gold digger, he kept using that against me, and it was very tempting for me to tell him the truth, but I had to think of Thomas and stayed silent for his sake. Rob had come back home for his winter break and I knew that he would be gone in a couple of weeks, so I only had to tolerate him for a few weeks, and since I had already put up with him and his terrible behavior for so many years, I didn't think that it would be much difficult. But I guess this time, Rob was planning on going out of his way to make things much more difficult for me, and so, a few days ago, he decided to take out my car without my permission and crashed it right before I was about to head out for a very important meeting that I had been talking about for days. I usually leave for work around 9 in the morning, but that day, I had a meeting with a very important client and was planning on leaving much earlier, since I didn't want to be late, and I'm really thankful that I planned ahead. I was ready to go out quite early, but Rob had been preparing so much earlier, and when I came out to check out my car, I saw that there was a huge dent on the hood and the sides had been scraped like nobody's business. I was obviously devastated, and I was even more upset by the fact that Rob was standing beside the car with the keys in his hand and a proud smile on his face like he thought that he had done something great. Neither my husband, nor I had left for work at that time, and when I saw him and what he had done to the car, I completely lost my mind and started freaking out at him. I'm usually not a violent person, but that day I just lost control and I ended up slapping Rob in the face, but it's not like I regret it. He tried to shove me, but by then, Thomas had come out of the house and had put two and two together, so he had been able to hold Rob back before he could do anything. I was sobbing because obviously I couldn't take that car to the meeting now and I would have to take a cab, which wasn't all that bad, but my car had been one of the first purchases that I had made with my hard-earned money, and it was quite significant to me. Also, taking a cab to a meeting that was so important for my career with such a high-profile client, it would just look a little odd, and I was really upset because of what had just happened, like any other person would have been. However, Rob did not seem to be regretting anything, and instead, he was actually screaming at me while his father was trying to hold him back and telling me that this ought to show me my place. He believed that I had way too much arrogance for somebody who was relying on my husband to fund my lifestyle, and he found it laughable that I had been talking about this important meeting for days even though I knew that at the end of the day, I was going to be living off of my husband's money, and he wanted to make me realize how pretentious and phony I was and that he could see right through me. Then, he started yelling at me saying that this was my lesson for trying to force his father into selling his business just so that I could have more money for myself, and then, he kicked my car once again, called me a gold digger and spat on the ground, even though Thomas was trying his best to hold him back. That was when I decided that I could no longer hide the truth from him anymore for Thomas' sake, and I told him everything. I tried to really rub it in his face and be as nasty as I could because I felt like he deserved it, and I didn't even care that he was just 19 and that I was a grown woman arguing with him, since, at that moment, I just wanted to hurt him. I told him about how his father's business had been failing for the past 3 years, and I had been the one carrying their dead weight, but instead of being grateful to me for it, he had tried to sabotage me. I also told him that I was the one who had been paying his college tuition so far, and even though his father had promised me that he would pay me back as soon as he could, it didn't matter because it was me who was doing it right now. So he had no right to speak to me that way, or call me a gold digger, because if anything, they were the ones who needed the gold and not me. I could see on his face that he was shocked beyond belief and was practically frozen in place, and so was Thomas. Then, I wiped my tears and started walking away while booking a cab for myself so I could head to the place of the meeting. I didn't even turn around because I did not want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Thankfully, the meeting went well because I had left quite early and I reached quite early as well. But then, I'd had enough time to compose myself and put on a professional face, and my decision to travel in a cabin instead of my own car didn't seem much of a big deal, so it was probably just in my head. When I came back home, I saw that my car was still in the same position, so I called my friend who runs a car repair shop and asked her to deal with it. And I don't know why, but just seeing my car in that condition made my heart break yet again, and I decided not to go inside the house. I got another cab and I went straight to a nearby hotel, and I haven't been home since then. The condition of my car made me realize just how disrespected I had been in my own home, all because Thomas couldn't stand up to his son and I had had enough. After this, there was no way that I could go back to that house and try to make things right with them because they definitely did not deserve it. That day, I kept waiting for at least Thomas to call me and check up on me after I returned from my meeting and went to the hotel, but even that did not happen in the next day. When I woke up after a night of crying myself to sleep, I decided that I couldn't live with these people anymore and love was obviously not enough to sustain a relationship. So I decided to call my lawyer and I told him that I wanted to file for a divorce. Then, I called up my brother, and I told him that I wanted him to go to my house, pack certain things, and then bring them to me because I just didn't even want to see Thomas or Rob. I explained the situation to him as well and he helped me out by bringing me my things. But I guess when he went home instead of me to collect my stuff, Thomas realized that I was not planning on coming back home anytime soon, and he and his son started bombarding my phone with calls and texts. I muted all the notifications from them because I didn't want to think about them but didn't block them because I wanted to know what they had to say. And before going to bed, when I finally decided to check the messages that they had been sending me, I realized that it was just them trying to apologize to me and telling me that they were willing to make everything right again, but all I had to do was just come back and speak to them once. I had expected that from Thomas, but the fact that even Rob was apologetic and was trying to tell me that he was ready to apologize and change as a person is what really took me by surprise. But I wasn't going to be fooled so quickly because it was very evident to me that they were only contacting me since they needed me to be there for them. If Thomas had really been sorry, then he would have contacted me the same day and apologized for everything. He wouldn't have had to wait to realize that I wasn't coming back home to apologize to me. In fact, even when I didn't return that day, he didn't contact me, and only when my brother went back to collect my things did he feel the need to reach out to me. So his apologies felt very hollow and meaningless to me, and as for Rob, I didn't even need to think twice as to why he was apologizing to me. I had figured out that he needed a way to pay for himself through college, and so far, I had been the one paying his tuition, so he obviously needed my help even now since he still had 2 years to go before he graduated. And since Thomas couldn't exactly help him out given his financial situation, I'm his only hope, and being the lazy brat that he is, I'm sure it didn't even occur to him that he could have just worked through college like most of us do or taken out a student loan. I was feeling very let down, even though they had apologized, because I knew that they did not actually mean that apology and they were just saying it because it was convenient. It took me a really long time to realize it, but I had finally come to the realization that I definitely loved Thomas a lot more than he loved me and a lot more than he deserved. But it was about time that I prioritized myself and let him go because, for the past 6 years, all he had done was make false promises and tell me that he was going to make everything right with me and Rob, but he had only enabled him so far because he would only tell Rob to be better, but there were never any real consequences to his actions. And that's why eventually, Rob had found the audacity to do something like this and actually expect to get away with it. Anyway, I have spoken to my lawyer about the divorce, and I've also told him that I want to file a lawsuit against them because I want them to pay for the damage that they have caused to me. So after reading those messages and realizing how fake their apologies were, I decided to write back to Thomas and I told him that I was going ahead with the divorce, and there was nothing that he could do to me because I had waited long enough for them to come around. But since it was not going to happen anymore, I was not going to wait around either and allow myself to be disrespected like this over and over again. The next morning, I woke up to another 100 messages from him, begging me not to leave and telling me that he was ready to do whatever it took to make me stay. He had also tried to call me several times throughout the night, but since I was asleep and had muted his notifications, I didn't know. At that moment, I started to feel really annoyed because in his messages, he was acting like he was genuinely ready to do whatever it took, and I knew that it was just him saying these things for the sake of it because he had said these things many times before as well. I had fallen for it earlier, but this time, I decided to tell him that I was going to give him an ultimatum, and if he was ready to make things work on my terms, then maybe I would come back. In reality, I did not have any intentions of going back because I had made up my mind after great difficulty and I was not going to go back on my word, but I just wanted to see what he would have to say about this. So I texted him back and I told him that I would be ready to consider couples counseling and staying with him if he promised me that he would never speak to his son again and would totally cut Rob out of his life. I told him that was the only solution to this, and if he was ready to do that, then we could talk, but otherwise, I would be going through with a divorce. So that was my ultimatum, and a couple of hours after that, he sent me another message, saying that he didn't know what to say to me because all Rob had was him. But he also loved me and he didn't want to give up on our marriage, so I had put him in a very difficult spot and he needed time to think. He was begging me not to go through with the divorce, but I told him that the fact that he was even considering this meant that neither I nor Rob were that important to him, and since he couldn't be loyal to either of us, it would be better for me to remove myself from the equation altogether and make things easier for him. Then, I guess he figured out that I actually had no intention of coming back to him in the first place, and he started accusing me of trying to mess with his head and playing mind games. His tone really annoyed me, so I decided to take screenshots of that conversation and send it to Rob, and then I turned my phone off because I didn't want to interact with either of them after that. It has been 2 days since then and Thomas has tried every possible way to get in touch with me because after I sent the screenshots to Rob, he left the house because he felt insulted by the fact that his father was even considering breaking ties with him to make his marriage work. So Thomas had pretty much been screwed over by both of us and he was blaming me for creating this situation, telling me that I'm the one responsible for his predicament at the moment and has been cursing me out, but I don't feel particularly bad about it. For the past 6 years, he had been constantly enabling his son and allowing me to get disrespected over and over again, and I thought that this was a very small way for me to get back at him. In comparison to what I have been through, this is pretty much nothing. He has been claiming that he had done his best to strike the right balance between me and Rob and had always tried to keep both of us happy, but that's not true. I was never happy. Anyway, I don't feel particularly bad about what I did, but my brother thinks that I should have just let it go instead of trying to create a rift between the two of them. He told me that it was just not worth it and revenge is not something that he encourages generally, so it's pretty true character for him. I'm just confused about whether I should or shouldn't feel sorry about this, and I need people to validate my decision right now because I'm pretty emotionally volatile at the moment. So Ida, because I purposefully created drama between my soon-to-be ex-husband and his son who always hated me? Edit, I stayed with him because I loved him, you guys. And when you ask somebody, you allow yourself to get manipulated, and it just took me a lot to realize that maybe he didn't love me as much as I loved him. I think it's pretty common for people to do this when they are trying to take advantage of you, and that's exactly what happened to me, and I'm not going to be shamed for it. There's a difference between somebody being a doormat voluntarily, and somebody like me, who has been manipulated in the name of love. I was making sacrifices to make my relationship work, and it just took me a really long time to realize that I was the only one doing it, which was not fair to me. I can understand that people might feel that I'm a pushover because I stayed with him for so long, but I don't really care. I finally found the spine and the courage to leave him, even though I still have some love for him in my heart. And for me, I think that's a big achievement, so I'm definitely not going to allow myself to be shamed. I made a mistake, like a lot of people do, and I think it's completely fine. So thank you to everyone who has been kind to me and to the ones who haven't been so kind. I don't really care. Update 1. Hey, thank you so much to everyone who commented and supported me. I'm obviously going through with the divorce, and yesterday, Thomas was served with the divorce papers. I don't think he's going to contest it, but I think we might have a snack because I have demanded quite a lot of settlement money since he had been living off of my dime for the past 3 years. And I would like to be paid back for all of that. But I don't think that right now, given his financial condition, he would be willing to pay me back, but no worries, we can always make it a long-term payoff situation. Anyway, that's not even a concern right now. We will leave with all of that during our mediation sessions if he tries to come up with his own terms. Some people have been worried that my brother and I had had a fallout over my behavior with him, but honestly, it was not that deep. My brother is a non-confrontational person, and he had just told me that he didn't think it was a good idea to interact with them even more and revenge and stuff, but it's not like he had told me to apologize for them or he had tried to cut me off. It had not been that dramatic. I'm sorry if it came off that way, but it was just a suggestion, and we haven't even spoken about it since then because neither does he think it's that important, and nor do I. Thomas and Rob have not tried to contact me for the past couple of days, which I am really grateful for because I don't want anything to do with them and I just want some peace and quiet. I have moved out of the hotel that I was staying in and I'm staying with a friend of mine right now. Hopefully, nobody's gonna try and find me here. Update 2. Hi, everyone. So it has been a couple of weeks and Thomas and I are going to attend our first mediation session tomorrow. Just like I had expected, he doesn't want to pay the amount that I have demanded as a settlement, which is weird because it was literally his son who had damaged my car. So if nothing else, at least he should offer to pay for that, and also, I guess he has forgotten the fact that he had promised to pay me back. He hadn't signed a contract or anything, unfortunately, but I have several texts from him, just casually conversing, and he has mentioned that he is definitely going to pay me back all the tuition that I have paid for as soon as he can afford to do it. So even though I don't have a contract, I guess that's going to do for now. And for everyone who had been asking me why exactly I had left home, it's a rented house. Even though we had been trying to split our rent for the past couple of years, it was his name on the lease and I didn't think it was worth fighting for, so I left. I've been looking for an apartment near my workplace, and as soon as I find one, I'm gonna move out of my friend's place and start living on my own again. I can't exactly live with my brother because he has his own family as well, and they have tried to tell me that I am welcome at their house, but I don't want anybody to have to give up their room for me. Anyway, that's where it's at right now, and hopefully, the mediation for the divorce will be over soon and I will be able to move on. I've already started actively trying to move on by throwing myself into my work, focusing on other things, and trying to take my mind off of Thomas. It's not easy, even though I know that he was toxic to me and it's best for me to leave. But part of me is always going to have a soft corner for him, and I'm dreading having to see him tomorrow, but I know that this has to be done, and, who knows, maybe he will mess up and I'll start hating him. Anyway, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed for the best. I'm probably going to be very busy for the next couple of months until the divorce is finalized, and I don't think I'll have time to keep you guys updated on everything that happens, so if I post any other updates, it's definitely going to be after the divorce. Wish me luck, you guys. Update 3. Hey, everyone. Long time no see, you guys. So just like I had promised you guys, I'm back after my divorce. My last update was probably around 7 months ago and my divorce was finalized last week. Since then, life has been pretty much a non-stop party because these past months have been very difficult and draining for me. But now that it's finally over, I've been hanging out a lot more with my friends and family, and I'm planning a trip to Greece with a couple of my high school girlfriends. I've earned this treat for myself and I'm going to try and enjoy my life to the fullest as of now. The process of the divorce was pretty toxic, and I don't want to get into it, but at least at the end of it, I got back all the money that I deserved, and there's some more in store since he couldn't pay back all of it to me up front. Since then, Thomas has been playing the victim on his social media, and most of our common friends have taken his side because they think that I was too hasty in getting a divorce and have been pretending like I never really loved him in the first place because I found it so easy to leave him. They have also been referring to me as the gold digger and as the most materialistic person they know, because I took back the money that I was owed, I guess. I don't know how that makes me the villain, but I'm happy to know that these people have shown their true colors, and I know for a fact that they were never my true friends in the first place. I have cut him off and everybody else who was taking his side during the divorce. I don't need this kind of negativity in my life, and like I said, I'm gonna be living it up to the fullest now. I have my friends and my family, and most apparently, I have found myself again, and that's all that I need. Jealous Sil locked me in a closet at my baby shower because she couldn't handle the fact that I was giving my grandchildren before her. Hi, so I'll get right into it. I've always had a very weird equation with my sister-in-law, and recently, something happened that kind of pushed me over the edge. And not just me, literally everyone in the family. I, 28F, have been married to my husband, 28M, for 3 years, and we have been together for 6. A couple of months ago, we found out that we were expecting our first child together, and we were thrilled about it. A few days ago this week, we decided to have a baby shower and invited our families and friends to our new house for the event. My sister-in-law, Connie, 30F, and her husband were also invited to the event. Connie has been with her husband for 8 years and married for 5, and they have been trying to have a baby for a really long time, but haven't been successful. Recently, they started their IVF treatments because even though neither of them had any fertility issues, they were still struggling with conceiving. Had she been a better person, I might have felt bad for her, but after what she did recently, I'm glad that she hasn't been able to conceive yet, because she's crazy and honestly doesn't deserve to be a mother. Connie and I don't really get along, and I would say that it's her fault because I've always been cordial with her, but she just has a weird attitude about everything. Earlier, she used to be nice to my face, but I had heard from several of her family members that she constantly put me down behind my back and made fun of a lot of things about me, so I slowly distanced myself from her. And then, eventually, we got to the point where we were only nice to each other for the sake of our family and nothing more. So inviting each other to events was more of a formality, and we knew it. She had been invited to my pregnancy announcement party as well, and even there, all she had done was sulk, and maybe I should have taken that hint and not invited her this time, but I didn't think much of it. Anyway, a couple of days ago, I had my baby shower, and Connie and her husband also attended. They were one of the first few guests to arrive, so we had taken a few people on a house tour since it was a new home. And yes, this is quite an important detail. And anyway, after everyone had arrived, and the baby shower was in full swing, I was speaking to a couple of friends when Connie came to my side and asked me if I could show her where our bedroom was because she wanted to rest for a bit since she was feeling kind of nauseated. I thought that it was quite strange that she had come to me and not her brother, but since I was busy with my friends and also because I was heavily pregnant, I told her to find my husband and ask him since I really didn't feel like getting up. But she told me that she also wanted to speak to me in person and privately, which is why she had asked me specifically since she didn't actually need to rest, she just wanted to talk to me and needed an excuse for it. That made me a little curious, so I decided to excuse myself and got up to take her to the bedroom so we could talk away from everyone else. I actually thought that she was going to apologize for her behavior in the past or something, because she was being really nice, and I guess that should have made me suspicious, but anyway, I didn't think of it and started walking with her to the bedroom. And here's the deal with our house, it's pretty big, and that means that our bedroom is quite a distance from the living room. There is a really long corridor leading up to it, and on one side of the corridor, we have something like a supply closet. So while we were crossing that, all of a sudden, Connie grabbed me by the arm, shoved me inside, and locked me in. The closet was a small, dark, and cramped room where we were storing a couple of unpacked boxes on the shelves, our vacuum cleaner, and a few mops. We hadn't yet installed lights in that room, and there was no ventilation apart from a tiny window that was situated really high up in the wall. Everyone in the family knows that I suffer from severe claustrophobia, so a room like that is pretty much the stuff of my nightmares. I started panicking as soon as Connie shoved me into the room, and I kept banging on the door and telling her to let me out, but I knew that there was no point because she must not have stayed outside the door for long. And there was loud music playing in the living room, where everyone was sitting because we wanted the baby shower to be fun for everyone, and it was more of a party than a shower. Besides, even without the music, there were a lot of people in the living room, and I'm sure they couldn't hear me above the conversation because the supply closet was a little distance away from the living room. In spite of that, I kept banging on the door and screaming for someone to come help me until my voice gave out, and I honestly don't remember what happened after that. I guess I must have fainted because of my claustrophobia, since the only thing I remember after that was waking up in the hospital. Thankfully, I was lucky enough to be found about 20 minutes after I'd left the living room, since it was time to open the presents, but I wasn't even there, so people came looking for me. Apparently, after Connie had returned to the living room without me, she had told my friends that I needed to rest for a bit, and that's why I'd chosen to stay in the bedroom and had sent her back to tell them. A pregnant woman choosing to take some time away from a party so she could rest wasn't all that strange, so nobody raised any questions because what Connie had done was so absurd, it hadn't even occurred to anybody that she might have been lying. And then, eventually, when it was time to open the presents, people started looking for me, and my husband started panicking when he realized that I wasn't in the bedroom like Connie had said. He had the good sense to check the supply closet, and there, he found me on the floor, unconscious. It didn't even take a second to call the ambulance so he could rush me to the hospital because he thought that something serious had happened and I had fainted because of some pregnancy-related complications, since I hadn't even woken up when sprinkled with cold water. Our families drove behind us and my sister stayed back home to handle all the guests. Until we reached the hospital and I regained consciousness, nobody discussed exactly why I had been in the supply closet in the evening, even though I'm the kind of person who refuses to enter that space while there is daylight because of how cramped and small it is. I remained unconscious for about 10 minutes, and when I woke up in the hospital, which is luckily just a few minutes away from our home, they ran some tests and stuff before telling my family that there was nothing they needed to be worried about. I'd just been knocked out cold because I had probably been in a very stressful situation and my blood pressure had dropped to a dangerously low level. That bit wasn't surprising because ever since I got pregnant, I had been having a lot of trouble with my blood pressure and the way it was fluctuating constantly. And I guess the claustrophobia and the panic attack must have triggered me somehow, which is why I ended up fainting and remaining unconscious for 10 whole minutes. After I came to my senses, they took me home and my sister made sure that all the guests were served food and told them that I was completely fine so they wouldn't worry. Once I had come back home, nobody was in the mood to have fun anymore, so everyone went back home and it was just me and our families who stayed so we could get to the bottom of what had happened. I felt exhausted, so even though I remembered exactly what had happened, I was in no mood to relive it and I just wanted everyone to leave so I could go to sleep. But luckily for me, my friends who had been speaking to me before I left the room with Connie had heard the conversation between me and her and they knew that it was Connie who had taken me out of the living room so we could go to the bedroom. And in all likelihood, she was the one responsible for this, so before they left, they had told my husband about it. They didn't bother me that evening, but the next morning, I found out from my husband that he had confronted Connie before the family had left, and while I was resting in the bedroom, they had been arguing in the living room. Our families were there and so was he, and Connie kept denying that she had anything to do with locking me in the supply closet. She claimed that she had gone with me to the bedroom to apologize for always being cold and a bit mean to me all the time, and apparently we had made up for the last couple of years. Then, I told her that I wanted some time away from the party, so I stayed in the bedroom and she came back. So she really had no idea why I had ended up in the supply closet and denied having anything to do with it. And since it was just her word against my friends, they couldn't come to a conclusion that evening. But the next morning, I woke up in a much better condition, and after breakfast, my husband asked me what exactly had happened and I told him everything. I told him I had kept banging on the door of the supply closet and begged Connie to let me out, but she probably hadn't even been there to hear me. He was furious and called the rest of the family over once again so we could deal with the situation, and this time, I was present as well, so she couldn't deny what she had done. I remember that morning, Connie showed up looking really sick and pale because she probably knew that she was screwed. Her husband also looked worried, but I don't think that he knew exactly what his wife had been up to. Anyway, I recounted what had happened that evening and confirmed the fact that Connie was the one who had pushed me into that closet and left me there. Everyone seemed horrified and nobody really knew what to say because I don't think anybody wanted to believe that somebody they had known for so long was capable of doing something so horrible. Truth be told, I get that because no matter what kind of relationship I had with Connie, even I had found it very difficult to believe that she had done something so unhinged. But that was the truth. She had tried to harm me on purpose, and I didn't even feel safe around her anymore. After I was done talking, my mother-in-law, Pam, was the first one to speak up. She sounded really disappointed and resigned, and said that she should have seen this coming, because, for the past couple of months, Connie had been absolutely livid with me. The reason for that was that she felt like I was rubbing it in her face, the fact that I was pregnant before her, even though she had been married for longer than me. She had even said that she was very unhappy with the fact that I would be the first woman in the family to give Pamela a grandkid and not her. But Pam thought that these ramblings against me were just harmless and petty, so she never brought it up with us, but she had no idea that Connie would go out of her way to do something like this out of anger and jealousy. At that point, Connie started crying and said that she hadn't done this out of anger, but it was only meant to be a harmless and innocent prank. She claimed that she had no idea that this was going to go so wrong, and she had actually intended on just leaving me locked in there for a couple of minutes as a prank, and then she would let me out and apologize for not just locking me in for her behavior towards me for the past couple of years. She said that she had completely forgotten about the fact that I was severely claustrophobic, and when she realized that I had fainted in the supply closet, she knew that people would think that she had done this on purpose, and that's why she had chosen to lie about the previous night, because she was scared of the consequences. But now, she did not want anyone in the family to misconstrue what she had done, and she had done it, so she insisted that it was just a prank and she didn't really intend to harm me. Unfortunately, for her, nobody really believed her because, well, it wasn't very believable. And I was very pissed off that she had put me through so much just because she was upset that she wasn't getting pregnant, as if it was my fault. I hadn't even been rubbing anyone's face like she was saying. I had only held a pregnancy announcement a couple of months back, and now, this baby shower. As far as I'm concerned, these are very common events pregnant people host, and they are not meant to rub the pregnancy into anyone's face. If that's how she felt, that was her own fault and insecurity showing. Also, what she had said about me being the first woman to give Pamela a grandkid was just disgusting, because this wasn't a competition or a race. The bottom line was that she was upset that she hadn't had any luck in getting pregnant, and I hadn't even been trying, but I still got pregnant. And it sucks for her that she's having to deal with fertility issues in spite of having all normal results, but that's really not my fault or my problem. And I had had enough rest, so I was furious the next morning, and I told Connie that for the past couple of years, she has been nothing but weird with me, but I had never even done anything to her. In fact, I had always tried to be nice to her, and she was the one who had constantly faked it with me and then gone behind my back to talk crap about me. Even then, I had stayed dignified and just distanced myself from her, but it seemed like she was just never happy and wanted to make sure that she created enough problems for me. I told her that I could understand that she was feeling jealous and insecure, but for somebody to act like this was just demented, and I did not feel safe around her anymore. I told her that she was a horrible human being for what she had done. Even though nothing had happened to me, something very easily could have happened, and I knew it was not a prank like she was trying to pass it off as. I knew that she saw me as competition, but unfortunately, I was not competing with anyone, and she had no right to drag me into this for no reason. Then, I told her that I did not want her visiting or speaking to me anymore, and then, I turned to everybody else and said that if they spoke to her again, then I would not speak to them. So it was either going to be her or me, and that's when Connie started protesting, saying that I had no right to do that, especially when she had just been playing a prank. I could see that both she and her husband were actually worried, but I had said whatever I had to say and they could go on screaming, but it didn't matter, since I knew that the rest of the family was also going to agree with me. Eventually, Connie got way too loud, and my mother-in-law had to step in. She told Connie to stay quiet because this was just the consequence of her own actions and she had lost the right to protest against it. And then, she said something that shocked us all. She backed me up and told me that I was right. It wouldn't be possible to look at Connie the same way because what had happened was just insane and nobody was going to believe her claim of it only being a prank. Then, she went on to say that she was cutting Connie out of her life for now and maybe in the future they would be able to make up, but right now, she didn't want anything to do with her. And that also meant that she was no longer going to be paying for the IVF treatments, so they would have to look for some other way to deal with it. My father-in-law, who is a generally quiet man and mostly lets Pamela do all the talking, also agreed with this, and I'm not even exaggerating. Connie and her husband literally erupted at that point. They started screaming at Connie's parents and said that they couldn't do this since everyone knew that they were really desperate to start a family and they couldn't afford the IVF treatments along with everything else that was going on, so Connie's parents had been their only hope. For context, my in-laws are quite rich but Connie's husband's parents aren't exactly on the same level, so they couldn't have approached them for help. Connie and her husband have just started a new business. It's barely been a few months, so they haven't managed to break yet, which is probably why they were relying on Connie's parents for the money for the treatments. We didn't know about that before it was brought up by them, and it was a huge deal that they were backing out of it since Connie had been pretty desperate to have a baby. When Connie and her husband started screaming hysterically, Pam stood her ground and said that given her current state of mind and the way she was behaving, she thought it was best for her not to have a baby right now, and I couldn't agree more. Nobody had anything to say and Connie just broke down and kind of just fell to the floor while crying, and it was pretty pathetic to see her like that, but I wasn't going to go back on my word. She continued to sob on the floor for about 5 minutes and nobody said anything during that time, but then, she got up and I thought that she was going to speak to her mother, but she came directly towards me and actually started begging for forgiveness. And I mean, she was really begging. She was on her knees and everything and said that she was genuinely and truly sorry for what she had done, but she knew that I could make this right by speaking to Pam and I just had to do it. Pam tried to be gentle with her and told her that her mind had been made up and not even I could change it, but Connie was not ready to listen. She was just hysterical and I don't think she was in her senses at the time. It was kind of awkward, so I didn't even know what to say and I really felt bad for her, but there was nothing that I could do. After a while, her husband grabbed her and got her to stand back up, and while she was still crying, he walked out with her and left us all still trying to process what had happened. After that, everyone went back home and it's just been me and my husband since then. We haven't been speaking about what happened with Connie because it was sad after one point, but right now, I've been feeling a little weird about it. I know that what she did to me was terrible, but I was the one who put forth an ultimatum for the rest of the family and forced them to cut her off, and that also meant that she couldn't have a baby because it meant no more IVF treatments. So I've been wondering if I was a jerk for doing that or not, and that's what I wanted to know, which is why I'm here for an objective opinion. Ida for telling my family and my in-laws to choose between me and my sister-in-law? Update 1. Hey, everyone. I would just like to first thank everyone who responded to my post and commented on it. The majority of the comments agreed that I'm not the one at fault here, so I'm pretty relieved because I had been feeling very heavy and guilty after what had happened. I guess I just hadn't expected her to beg for forgiveness like that, and she had been pretty hysterical, so I guess I started feeling bad for her. I still kind of feel bad for her, but to be honest, this was something that she deserved. It wouldn't have been fair for her to get away with all of this scot-free because regardless of what her intention had been, I still don't know if it really had been meant to be a prank or not, but the consequences of it were not really good for me. And to be honest, I think I'm still gonna stick by what I had said about her not being ready to be a mother just yet. If she is acting like this, so unhinged and irresponsible, just because she's pissed at me, then I'm not sure how she thinks she's ready to handle a baby. It's very obvious to me, and I think it's clear to Pam as well, that Connie has some serious issues, so until she deals with that, I think it's better for her to stay away from motherhood. I've spoken about this with my husband, and I told him that I have been feeling really bad about what happened with Connie, but he told me not to worry about it. Apparently, his sister had always been a bit of a hothead, but everyone had thought that she had left that kind of behavior back in her teens. She used to be one of your typical vindictive mean girls back in high school and even in college, but this was not just mean, this was downright cruel. And I knew that she had always had a mean streak in her, but for her to manifest in waves like this, I don't think anyone had seen that coming. Anyway, my husband reassured me, and after that, I felt considerably better about all of this. So I'm gonna try and put it all out of my head now and just focus on having a happy rest of my pregnancy. Update 2. Hey. So 8 days have passed since my baby shower, and since the event didn't exactly end well, we hosted a formal dinner for everyone tonight to make it up to them, and obviously, Connie and her husband were not invited this time. I hadn't opened any of the gifts, so I decided to open them today, with all my friends and family around me. We were all having quite a nice time until dessert was served, because that was the time around which Connie decided to make a post on social media, calling me out on my behavior. Yeah, the irony is astounding that after everything that has happened, she is the one who is calling me out. I had blocked her shortly after the incident had taken place, so I didn't know about the post, but she had tagged a couple of my friends and a few family members on it, so they were notified and read it out to me. It was ridiculous. She had posted that apparently I had always been in competition with her, and I had really thought that I won when I got pregnant before her. And she acknowledged the fact that she had lost her temper a couple of days back, during my baby shower, and had locked me in the closet, but my way of retaliation has been a lot more severe than what she had done. She posted that I had forced her family to cut her off and made sure that she wouldn't be able to get pregnant by convincing her mother not to contribute to her IVF treatments anymore. But unfortunately, my plan was not going to work because they had decided to pay for the IVF treatment themselves, and they were definitely going to have a baby. so the rest of the family could cut her off, but it was not going to make a difference to her because she was determined to become a mother and start her own family. And that family would be far better than the one she was born in. Since apparently her both family was too busy, sucking up to me instead of looking after the only daughter that they had. I tried really hard to feel offended at that post, but honestly, it was just such a huge joke that I ended up laughing at it and everyone else followed me. So we brushed it off as a big joke and didn't even talk about it because I wasn't going to let Connie ruin an event for me a second time. I'm pretty sure that she had picked this day on purpose as well to make that post because she wanted to gain sympathy and attention, but unfortunately, nobody really has any of that to spare for her. Not after what she has done, at least. Update 3, hey, so I have great news for everyone. I recently gave birth to a really beautiful and healthy baby girl. She is 6 weeks old now and I already love her more than anything in this world. In fact, my husband and I are already fighting over who loves her more, but we know for a fact that we love her the most. Motherhood has been beautiful so far and I've had my fair share of struggles, but this has made it worth it. But this update is not going to be about my daughter, even though I could totally go on writing about her. This is actually going to be about Connie because she's getting divorced and I'm honestly not surprised that this is happening. I heard from a couple of people that she and her husband have been living separately for the past couple of weeks and they have finally announced on social media that due to irreconcilable differences, they are going to be separating. Apparently, they had tried really hard to make it work in the past couple of months after the incident with me, but I guess the stress of everything just got to them and they can't be together anymore. And I don't think it's going to be an amicable divorce because they have decided to sell their business, and had it been a mutual thing, I don't think they would have tried to do that because that business was their first baby and they had put in a lot of hard work into it. It's sad that they are separating, but not very shocking. Connie's parents are still not speaking to her, though, even though I have told them that I would be fine with it if they decided to get back in touch with her after the news of the divorce broke. But they told me that unless she apologizes to everyone and does it sincerely, they are not interested in having any contact with her. Honestly, I count myself to be very lucky that I have such supportive and loving in-laws because I don't think everybody has been blessed by people like them in their lives. My own parents have also been incredibly supportive ever since I gave birth and even before that, and I feel really lucky that I have such a great support system around me. Connie could have had the same for herself if she had just bothered to be nice to the people around her, but well, that was never one of her strong suits. At this point, I don't even feel angry, I just feel bad for her. She could have had a good life, regardless of the unexplained fertility issues, but she chose this for herself. Anyway, that's none of my concern anymore and I just felt like I had to share this here so I could get it out of my system. But now, all I'm gonna do is focus on raising my daughter, and yeah, I can't wait for all the great parts. Toxic parents and sister canceled my 18th birthday behind my back, then kicked me out over dirty dishes. They got a taste of karma as they forgot to uninvite this special guest. Hi, people of Reddit. I am Whitney, 18F, and my bully parents are finally getting justice for what they did and I'm happy about it. To give you a little backstory, let me tell you about my mom, Eleanor, 48F, and dad, Max, 51M. My parents are kind of bullies, and they have always favored my golden child sister, Elsa, 21F. I've spent most of my life feeling like a second-class citizen in my own home. I'm not going to lie, it's been really tough, and I've reached a point where I need to vent. So, growing up, I was the one who could never do anything right. When I was 16, I decided to take up painting. It was a hobby I was really passionate about. I spent hours working on a piece for a local art competition. When I finally completed it, I was super proud and couldn't wait to show my parents. But instead of being supportive, my mom took one look at it and said, "Well, it's not exactly a masterpiece, is it?" And proceeded to show it to Elsa, who gave a half-hearted compliment and then went back to her homework. I felt crushed. My dad didn't even bother to look at it, he was too busy watching Elsa's new dance video. One of the worst instances was when I was 15 and had my first serious boyfriend. I was really excited about it and wanted to introduce him to my family. I was so nervous, but I thought it would be a big step in feeling more connected with them. Instead, my mom and dad barely acknowledged him. They just made snide comments about how he didn't seem like the type of guy they'd expect me to date. My mom even went so far as to make a joke about how he seemed like he was from the wrong side of the tracks. I was mortified. They never made an effort to get to know him or make me feel supported in my own relationship. And then there was the time I had a really bad bout of the flu. I was bedridden for days, feeling absolutely miserable. My parents didn't even bother to check in on me. They were too busy with Elsa's rehearsal for the play. I remember laying in bed, hearing them discussing her costume and schedule, and feeling completely abandoned. When Elsa came home, she just gave me a patronizing smile and said, "I hope you're feeling better now," before heading off to hang out with her friends. The worst part is that Elsa never really appreciated me or valued me either. I try to have conversations with her, and share things about my life, and it felt like she was always too busy or too disinterested. I only confided in her about how hurt I felt from all this favoritism, and she just shrugged it off, saying, "You're just being dramatic. Mom and Dad love us both." But it's like, if they really did love us both, why was I always treated as an afterthought? I even tried to bond with her over shared interests, like books and movies, but she was always more interested in talking about herself or her friends. For example, she'd come home from a weekend trip with her friends, and instead of asking me about my week or how I was doing, she'd just go on and on about her latest adventures and how amazing her friends were. It always felt like I was just a backdrop to her life, a mere spectator in her grand narrative. I could go on and on about the countless little instances where I felt neglected or undervalued. It's been a lifetime of living in Elsa's shadow, of feeling like the backup plan or the afterthought. And the hardest part is that my parents never see it. They think they're being fair, that they love us both equally, but it's so clear to me that their love for Elsa is just on a whole different level. Sometimes, I wonder if it's something wrong with me if I'm just not worthy of their attention and affection. But then I think about all the things I've done, all the ways I've tried to prove myself, and it's like no matter how hard I try, it's never enough. I've even tried to talk to my parents about it, but they just dismiss me or tell me I'm being overly sensitive. They say things like, "You're imagining things or Elsa's achievements are just more visible," but it doesn't make the sting any less painful. So, 2 days ago was my 18th birthday. For context, Elsa and my birthday are just 1 day apart, so you can imagine how our family celebrations typically go. Growing up, I've always had this sinking feeling that my birthday was just overshadowed by Elsa's, but this year, I decided to keep things simple. I knew better than to expect a big celebration at this point. I've pretty much stopped dreaming about anything extravagant. So, I told my parents that all I wanted was a quiet dinner at a nice restaurant with just a few of my friends and family. Honestly, I figured it was a modest request, given everything. I was really excited about this birthday. Turning 18 felt like a huge milestone. I mean, it's the age where you finally get to say, "I'm legally an adult." And all that. I was looking forward to it as a way to celebrate a bit of independence and mark the end of my teenage years. I had picked out this gorgeous dress that I had been eyeing for months. It was this sleek, navy blue number with a bit of sparkle that made me feel like I was finally stepping into my own. I even went out of my way to find a restaurant that I thought everyone would enjoy. After doing some research, I settled on a place that had great reviews and a cozy atmosphere. I thought it would be perfect for a low-key birthday dinner. I went to the trouble of searching for the best restaurant, making sure it was somewhere everyone could agree on. I didn't want any last-minute stress or arguments over where to eat. I wanted the night to be as smooth and enjoyable as possible. So, I found this cute little bistro that served a variety of dishes and had a good mix of vegetarian and non-vegetarian options. I even called ahead to make sure they had a table for us, just to be on the safe side. When I finally had everything planned out, I was really looking forward to the evening. I felt like I had done everything right and that this was going to be a special moment. I let my mom know about the restaurant and the time I thought would work best. I said I'd like to start the dinner around 7 p.m., and she agreed. She even said she'd make sure everyone would be there on time. I was so relieved that at least one part of this whole process seemed to be coming together smoothly. In the days leading up to my birthday, I was buzzing with excitement. I got everything ready: the dress, the shoes, and even a little bit of makeup. I wanted to feel good and look my best for the occasion. I was hoping that this year, despite the usual overshadowing, I could actually enjoy my birthday for once. It was a small, personal celebration, but that's exactly what I wanted. No big parties, no extravagant decorations, just a nice, intimate dinner with people I care about. I thought this would be a chance for my family to show a little appreciation for me too. It felt like a reasonable expectation given how little I had asked for. I reached the restaurant at 6:45 and waited outside for 15 minutes because I didn't want to go in early and seem too eager. I figured it'd be polite to give everyone a little leeway to arrive, especially since it was my special day. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect, so I decided to stick to the plan and wait until 7 p.m. before going in. When I finally walked inside at 7, hoping to see everyone gathered and ready to celebrate, it was like walking into an empty theater. I was the only one there. The reservation was still on the books, so that was a relief, but the hostess gave me a look of surprise when she saw me standing alone. She kindly led me to my table, which, of course, was beautifully set and ready, but it felt more like a stage for a solo performance than a cozy dinner with friends and family. The waiter came over almost immediately and asked if I'd like to order something while I waited. I was feeling a bit awkward and didn't want to start eating or drinking alone, so I told him no, that I'd prefer to wait for the rest of my party. He seemed understanding, though I could tell he was a little puzzled by the fact that no one else had arrived. I hoped it was just a matter of a few minutes delay, maybe some last-minute traffic or people running late. As I sat there, I tried to stay optimistic. I checked my phone a couple of times to see if I had missed any messages. Maybe someone was stuck in traffic or there was a mix-up with the timing. I kept looking toward the entrance, hoping to see familiar faces walk through the door. The restaurant was starting to fill up with other patrons, and I felt increasingly self-conscious sitting there alone, wearing my special dress, with no one to share it with. The minutes dragged on, and I was beginning to feel a knot in my stomach. My excitement from earlier in the day was starting to give way to a mix of anxiety and disappointment. I tried to keep my mind off it by scrolling through my phone or fiddling with my menu, but the reality was starting to sink in. It was past 7:15, and still no sign of anyone. At that point, I began to worry. I didn't want to make a scene or call anyone out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously off. I tried to convince myself that maybe everyone was just running exceptionally late, but the minutes kept ticking by with no change. My hopes were dwindling, and I was feeling more and more isolated. By 7:30, I couldn't deny it any longer. It was clear that my family and friends hadn't shown up yet. I started to get a bit emotional, sitting there at my table, feeling like I was the only one who had shown up to their own birthday party. I began to think back on how I had made sure everything was arranged and planned, how I'd been excited and looking forward to this night, only to end up waiting alone. I kept telling myself to stay calm and composed, but it was getting harder with each passing minute. When no one showed up after 30 minutes, I started to get really anxious. I decided to call my parents, thinking maybe they were just running late. I called them repeatedly, but no one answered. My heart was racing, and I felt this sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew I needed to figure out what was going on, so I decided to call Elsa, hoping she might have some answers. She picked up on the second ring, and I tried to keep my voice calm, even though I was on the verge of panic. I asked her where everyone was, and she casually mentioned that she was at home. I was completely baffled. I asked her when she was planning to come to the restaurant, and that's when she dropped the bombshell. She said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, but we had to cancel the party. Mom wasn't feeling well." I was in disbelief. I asked her why no one had told me about the cancellation. I thought maybe there was some sort of miscommunication or a mix-up. Elsa's response was shockingly nonchalant. She said, "I'm sorry, I guess I forgot to let you know." It felt like a punch to the gut. Here I was, dressed up, waiting at the restaurant, and they hadn't even bothered to give me a heads up. I tried to process what she was saying. I asked her if there was any chance they could still make it if Mom was okay, or if there was some way to salvage the evening. But Elsa's response was cold and dismissive. She said, "I really have to go now," and then she just hung up on me. I was left sitting there, stunned and hurt. I tried to keep my composure, but it was really tough. I felt like I had put so much effort into planning this evening and had gotten nothing in return. I looked around the restaurant, trying to keep my tears at bay, and I could see families and groups of friends enjoying their meals. It made me feel even more isolated. I was sitting there with no one to talk to, no one to celebrate with. The emptiness of the situation was overwhelming. I was sitting there feeling pretty miserable, so I decided to order something to eat. I told the waiter that no one was coming and asked if I could move to a smaller table. At this point, I was just trying to make the best of a bad situation. I ordered a simple meal, not really caring much about what I ate, and pulled out my phone to pass the time. As I was scrolling through my feed, trying to distract myself from the growing sadness, I noticed someone walking through the restaurant's entrance. I looked up, and to my shock, it was my grandfather. I hadn't expected him to come, especially since I thought my mom had uninvited everyone. I was genuinely surprised and, honestly, relieved to see a familiar face. He walked over with a warm smile and said, "Happy birthday." I felt a rush of emotion as he came closer. I stood up and gave him a big hug. It was one of those hugs that you need when everything else feels like it's falling apart. I thanked him for coming, and it felt like a small glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak evening. He looked around and asked me where everyone else was. Up until that moment, I had been holding back tears, trying to keep it together. But when he asked that simple question, it was like a dam breaking open. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I started crying, right there in the middle of the restaurant. My face flushed, and I could feel the tears streaming down. I took a deep breath and tried to explain what had happened. Between sobs, I told him about how I had arrived early, how no one had shown up, and how Elsa had called to tell me that the party was cancelled because Mom wasn't feeling well. I told him how I had been sitting alone, feeling completely abandoned and forgotten on what was supposed to be my special day. My grandfather listened patiently, and I could see the concern in his eyes. He put a comforting hand on my shoulder and told me he was so sorry. He said he didn't know about the cancellation and that he had come as soon as he could. It was clear he felt bad about the situation, and his presence was a much-needed comfort. We chatted as we waited for my food to arrive. He shared some stories from his day and made a few jokes to lift my spirits. It wasn't the lively birthday dinner I had imagined, but his company made it feel a bit more like a celebration. As we talked, I felt a sense of relief. Even though my family had let me down, at least I wasn't completely alone. When the food finally arrived, it was hard to fully enjoy it. The earlier events had left a bitter taste, and I found myself picking at my plate more out of habit than hunger. My grandfather, ever the trooper, made sure to keep the conversation light and engaging. He kept me company and made the best of the situation. My grandfather drove me home, and I was still feeling pretty raw from the evening. When we arrived, I just wanted to crawl into my room and shut out the world. I didn't say anything to my parents, I just went straight to my room and closed the door behind me. I was hoping for some peace and quiet after the emotional roller coaster of the night. A few minutes later, though, I was jolted from my thoughts by the sounds of screaming coming from the living room. I was a bit startled and worried, so I decided to go downstairs to see what was going on. As I made my way down the stairs, the shouting got louder and more intense. When I reached the bottom, I saw my grandfather and my mom in a heated argument. My mom was yelling, asking my grandfather how he could do this to them. Her voice was full of anger and disbelief. I was completely confused. I had no idea what they were fighting about. I stood there, trying to make sense of the situation, and it was clear that this was more than just a simple family squabble. From what I could gather, the argument was about something that had to do with my grandfather's will. Apparently, my grandfather had promised my mom that he would leave her his house in his will, but now he had decided to change his mind. My grandfather was furious, saying that my mom was still the same entitled brat she had been when she lived with him. He was clearly upset and ashamed of how she had treated me, his own granddaughter. In the middle of the shouting match, my grandfather turned to me, took a deep breath, said, "Happy birthday, sweetie," and then headed for the door. It was a strange moment, filled with mixed emotions. I felt a bit of comfort from his kind words, but the chaos that had unfolded was overwhelming. He left without another word, and I was left standing there, trying to process everything. Once he was gone, my mom turned to me with an intense look. She demanded to know what I had told him. I was caught off guard by the question, but I tried to stay calm. I simply said, "Nothing, just the truth." It was the truth after all about how I had been left alone on my birthday and how Elsa had casually mentioned that the party was cancelled without informing me properly. My mom's face contorted with anger, but before she could say anything else, I just turned and walked back to my room. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, feeling a mix of exhaustion and frustration. I had hoped for a quiet end to a difficult day, but it seemed like the night was far from over. Eventually, I lay down on my bed, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I felt emotionally drained and wished I could just fast forward through the rest of the night. The arguing had left me feeling even more isolated, and I couldn't shake the sense that I was caught in the middle of something much larger than myself. The evening had not gone at all as I had planned, and I was left wondering if things would ever change or if this was just how things would always be. As I closed my eyes, I hoped for some semblance of peace and a better start to the next day. When I woke up the next day, I felt like I was in a completely different world. The entire atmosphere in the house was icy and uncomfortable. My family was treating me with this cold distance that made me feel like I was invisible. It was a stark contrast to the usual chaos and warmth of family interactions. I walked downstairs and immediately noticed that things were already set up for Elsa's birthday. It was like a complete switch had been flipped overnight. My mom was bustling around the kitchen, clearly feeling better, and she was cooking up a storm. The house was filled with the smells of what I could only guess were preparations for a big birthday celebration. I felt a pang of sadness and frustration as I realized how different things were from the night before. I tried to keep my emotions in check, but it was really hard to see the celebration for Elsa being planned so meticulously while my own birthday had been so disregarded. I was still feeling the sting of being abandoned and hurt by the lack of consideration for my family. I couldn't just sit there and watch them prepare for Elsa's party when it felt like they had completely ignored my feelings and my birthday. So, I decided to leave. I packed a few things and went over to my best friend's house for the night. I needed a break from the tension and the cold atmosphere at home. I needed somewhere to go where I felt welcomed and understood. My best friend's place was a sanctuary where I knew I could at least feel a little bit of normalcy and comfort. It was an impromptu decision, but it felt like the right one at that moment. The weird part was, that even after I left, my mom didn't even bother to call me. There was no text, no call asking me to come back for Elsa's birthday. It was like my absence didn't matter to them at all. That was a huge blow to my already bruised feelings. It made me wonder if they really didn't want me there or if they just didn't care enough to make an effort to reach out. So now, I'm sitting here at my best friend's house, writing this post, trying to make sense of everything that's happened. I'm feeling a mix of anger and sadness that's been hard to shake off. It's frustrating to feel so disregarded by the people who are supposed to be closest to me. I'm trying to figure out how to deal with these emotions and how to move forward. I'm reaching out because I need advice. How do I cope with feeling this way? How do I stop being so angry and sad about what's happened? I want to find a way to heal from this and not let it consume me. Any advice or words of encouragement would really mean a lot right now. Thanks for listening to my story. Update 1. Hi everyone. I've got quite the update for you. I've been kicked out of my house. Yeah, it sounds as dramatic as it feels. It's only a few weeks until I'm supposed to head off to college, but apparently, my parents couldn't wait that long. The craziest part? It all started over me not doing the dishes. So, here's how it went down. I hadn't gotten around to doing the dishes one night, and my mom completely lost it. She started railing at me about how ungrateful and entitled I am, how I never help around the house and all that jazz. It felt like she was blowing it way out of proportion. I tried to explain that I had been really busy with preparations for college, and it was just one night. But instead of calming down, she just got angrier. Well, I lost my patience too. I snapped back and told her exactly how I felt about the way they've treated me over the years, how I've always been the one overlooked, how my birthday was just another example of their disregard. I aired out everything I'd been bottling up for years, and once it was out, I couldn't hold back. I told her about the emotional distance, the favoritism toward Elsa, and how hurt I felt about everything. As you can imagine, that didn't go over well. Things got really heated. My mom's face turned bright red, and she screamed at me to get out. I was stunned but not surprised. I'd seen this coming for a while now, though I didn't expect it to be triggered by something as mundane as the dishes. I didn't wait around for any more drama. I grabbed a bag, threw in a few essentials, and just left. I didn't even bother with a big goodbye or explanation. I was too upset and needed to get out of there before things got even worse. I told my mom I'd come back for my stuff when I was heading to college, but for now, I needed to be somewhere else. I went straight to my best friend's house. I called her up on the way, hoping she wouldn't mind me crashing there for a bit. Luckily, she was totally understanding and told me I could stay as long as I needed. Her place has been a haven for me ever since. I don't know what to do now. Update 2. Hi everyone. I know it's only been a few weeks since my last update, but I figured I should let you all know what's been happening. Honestly, things have been pretty quiet on my end, but there's a bit of news that might interest you. So, yesterday, I finally got a chance to talk to my grandfather. After the whole drama of being kicked out and everything, I felt like I needed to let him in on what was going on. I called him up and filled him in on the whole messy situation, how I got kicked out over not doing the dishes, the fight with my mom, and the fallout with my family. His reaction was intense, to say the least. He was absolutely furious when he heard what had happened. He couldn't believe that things had escalated to that point over something as trivial as dishes. But more than that, he was upset that I hadn't reached out to him sooner. He said he would have been more than willing to help me out if I had called him earlier. It was a mix of relief and frustration, hearing that relief because he was willing to help, but frustration at the timing of everything. We ended up having a pretty long conversation about what had happened and how I was feeling. It was really comforting to have someone who understood my side of the story and who was willing to step up and support me. He reassured me that he was on my side and that I shouldn't feel like I had to go through this alone. It felt good to know that there was at least one person in my family who was genuinely supportive. My grandfather has decided to come over the day after tomorrow to help me get my stuff from my parents' house. It's a huge relief to know that I won't have to deal with this by myself. He's going to help me pack up everything I need for college and get it all sorted out. I'm honestly a bit nervous about going back to the house and facing my parents again, but having my grandfather there makes me feel a lot more confident. Update 3, hi everyone. So, I've got another update for you, and unfortunately, it's a pretty rough one. Yesterday was supposed to be the day when I finally got my stuff from my parents' house with the help of my grandfather. However, things took a really terrible turn. When we arrived at my parents' house, I was shocked to find that almost all of my belongings were gone. It turned out that they had either thrown away or donated pretty much everything. All that was left were a few old notebooks. I couldn't believe my eyes. It felt like a total violation of my personal space and belongings. I was at a loss for words. Naturally, I confronted my parents about it. I asked them what had happened to my stuff and if they knew where it all went. Their reaction was to laugh at me. They actually laughed. It was like they found my distress amusing. I was stunned and heartbroken. It was like a final slap in the face, and I couldn't hold back my tears. My grandfather was absolutely furious when he saw how they treated me. His face was red with anger, and I could tell he wanted to confront them more aggressively, but he kept his cool. Instead of getting into a big argument, he decided it was best to just leave. It wasn't worth escalating the situation further, especially since I was already in such a fragile state. We got back into the car, and that's when the tears really started to flow. I was crying pretty hard, feeling utterly defeated and emotionally drained. My grandfather, being the incredible support that he is, did his best to comfort me. He told me he was so sorry that things had turned out this way and that he wished he could have done more. He reassured me that I wasn't alone and that we would figure this out together. To lift my spirits and make sure I had what I needed for college, my grandfather took me shopping. It was a bit surreal walking through stores picking out things I needed for the next chapter of my life while still feeling the sting of what had happened. But his kindness and determination to help me get back on my feet really meant a lot. We managed to pick up a few essentials, and it was a relief to know that I had the basics covered. On top of that, my best friend told me I could have whatever I wanted from her stuff. She offered me clothes, supplies, and anything else I might need. It was a huge comfort to know that even though I was going through such a tough time, I had people who genuinely cared and wanted to support. GF cheated on me and our whole relationship was nothing after she lied about going to a show I wanted to see. Now she's threatening a restraining order when I confronted her. I'm not going to start out with the whole our relationship is perfect, but thing that you always see on here. I'll admit this has been one of the hardest relationships I've been in. I still very much love her. She's beautiful, strong, driven, successful, and independent. However, my M30 girlfriend, F28, is a dismissive avoidant to the extreme, and it's been causing a lot of issues in our relationship. She's in therapy, but that is mostly focusing on managing her OCD and related eating disorder. Fun fact, all three issues are often comorbid. She has issues expressing her emotions/needs and struggles with communication, commitment, and compromise as a result. We've been dating a little over a year. Prior to me, her longest relationship was less than 2 months. She usually shuts down and runs from relationships if she feels smothered, if her partner lets her down, or if she feels like she's being criticized. It doesn't take much for this to happen. She does recognize this, and she's trying to work on it. But it's hard on us both. Both of us are big theater nerds. A few months ago, we had a trip to a city about 2 hours from us to visit her grandparents, and I got to meet her best friends from college for the first time. While there, we went to a show with her friends. I honestly had a great time. Her grandparents loved me and I got along really well with her friends. There was another show coming up in a few months that both of us have connections to. It was the first musical she ever saw with her grandparents, and I worked on a production in high school. I asked my girlfriend if we could go. I even offered to bring her grandparents and treat them to a nice night out. They don't get to go out much anymore, or we could go with her college friends. I immediately got shut down. She said that she didn't really like that show, which she has mentioned before, and she didn't want to see it again. Fine, no big deal. That show was last weekend. Not sure if this is relevant yet. Feel free to skip this paragraph. We kind of had a fight on Saturday. I was about 15 minutes late to picking her up to hang out at a brewery and she felt really let down. She's broken up with other people for similar reasons, and gave the silent treatment all day. Eventually I get her to open up, we apologize to each other, and have a decent evening at home. The next morning, she says that she doesn't feel great and wants to go home to rest. I drive her home and asked if she needed me to stay with her to take care of her or anything. Nope, she just wants a quiet day to herself. I tell her to let me know if she needs anything and headed home. I don't hear from her all day. Even when she's relaxing, we're usually trading memes and Snapchats of our cats, but she's not even opening my messages. Earlier that week she had a migraine so bad that I needed to take her to the emergency room, and her sister just had a baby that's been having some health problems. I started to get really worried that something was wrong by late afternoon, so I decided to check her location on Find My. She's not at home. She's not even in our city. She's just leaving a restaurant and walking to the theater to go see the show that I really wanted to see. I assume she was with her friends again. The restaurant is a favorite of theirs. It's a nicer restaurant where they would have needed a reservation, and the show is a popular show. Everything would have needed to have been planned well in advance. I'm not worried about her cheating or anything. Her friends are married to each other and she wouldn't be going with anyone else except maybe her grandparents. I'm just so hurt over everything. I really wouldn't have minded if she said she already had plans to go to the show with her friends. I just don't understand why she lied to me about not being willing to go, and why she lied to me to hide that she was going. I think she just didn't want to explain that she wanted to go with her friends and without me. I don't know how to bring this up to her. She's very sensitive to criticism. Even though I'm hurt not mad at her, she'll probably take it as an attack. She also just doesn't really like me expressing my feelings to her in general and tends to shut down and withdraw. I'm worried that if I bring this up, she'll just break up and leave to avoid the conversation. She's threatened to do that before on much smaller issues. How can I bring this up without scaring her off? Update, September 25, 2024. I wanted to thank everyone for their input on my last post. I know it's a bit cliche, but I wasn't expecting it to take off so much. Even the harsher comments helped me get a better grasp on the situation. I wasn't going to bother posting an update, but a few people have messaged me. So I figured I'd finally write this out. Spoiler, not a good ending. I spent a lot of time thinking about what to do. I made my post on Monday, we had a date planned for Wednesday. I decided I would bring it up then. On Tuesday she was having a bad day at work, but she didn't really let me know. She texted me about an email that her asshole boss sent her, and I thought my response was appropriately supportive and validating, basically telling the guy off and letting her know she's right to be frustrated. I get a Kurt, is that all you took from that? Back from her. I probably should have thought a bit more, but I was dealing with my own work issues and a migraine, so I lazily just doubled down on my first response, again reiterating that she has every right to be angry. She didn't respond. I didn't double text, but I did reach out via Snapchat and Instagram messages to see if she'd respond there. She didn't open any of my messages. Because I'm always trying to make excuses for her, I assume she's busy and will respond when she has time. If you couldn't tell from the first post, my girlfriend really struggles with communication. Finally, 4 hours later she responds with how she doesn't feel emotionally supported and she needs some space to think about the future of our relationship. I was super confused and asked what was wrong. I got the response, I just had a really crappy day and you didn't even bother to call me. I kind of snapped at that a little. I asked why she didn't respond to any of my messages, or why didn't she say, hey, I had a really bad day at work and need to hear your voice or something like that. I pointed out that she never asks me for emotional support, she just acts out until I figure out what she needs or until she gets frustrated and gives me the silent treatment. I didn't respond because it wouldn't have mattered. I cannot always be the one putting in the work. I explained for what felt like the 1000th time that I can't read her mind. She needs to communicate her needs. She's intentionally avoiding work by refusing to open up and asking for help. I understand that's hard for her, but I can't make up for that on my end. I pointed out that I didn't realize she was having an awful day. I just thought she was dealing with regular work bullshit. She never tried to clarify how she was feeling or what she needed. I've been saying I need more effort from you for months and nothing has changed. This is the exact argument I didn't want to have, and you pushed it. I responded that I desperately want to support her, but she isn't giving me anything to work with. I gave her the space she asked for and told her I love her. The next morning she asks if she can come over after work to talk. After I confirm, she goes back to giving me the silent treatment. I soon found myself blocked on Snapchat and Instagram. Weirdly enough, it was this that finally made it click for me about how bad I'd been treated. I was so starved for emotional and non-sexual physical intimacy. She doesn't even like holding hands, let alone cuddling, and was an anxious mess from constantly walking on eggshells. But I'm stubborn. I loved her. I really wanted things to work and was still wanting to talk things out. She's pulled a similar stunt before and we ended up staying together. She finally comes over. We start out going over our communication issues. Her big thing is that she feels that with a compatible partner everything should come naturally, including knowing when your partner needs something without asking. She can get overwhelmed and just shuts down, and asking for help is also very overwhelming for her, goes against her need to feel independent and self-sufficient, and feeds her fear of getting into a toxic codependent relationship like her parents. So she feels that this is an appropriate expectation to have. I explain that she's asking me to read her mind, that she's putting all of the emotional labor on me, and that isn't a realistic or fair expectation to have. She started to change the subject, which is a go-to of hers when she's uncomfortable with the conversation. We jumped around to various issues in our relationship. She randomly says that she doesn't feel like she really knows me. I ask her what she means by that. She says that she never knows what I'm thinking or feeling and I'm too closed off, all false, and this definitely feels like projection on her part. It also hit on a deep insecurity that she didn't actually care enough about me to try to get to know me. She barely engaged in my interests and hobbies, rarely asked me questions about myself. If she did, they were usually negative questions. On the other hand, I made all the effort to know about the things she cared for. She then brought up that we've been dating for a year, but have no plans to move in together. Again, this hit on a major insecurity of mine. I had been trying to bring this up for months. I straight up asked her when she was having issues at her place and she was thinking about moving. This was late July around our 1-year anniversary. On the other hand, she gave me different answers every time I asked her what she wanted for her or our future, if she didn't try to change the subject instead. She's never brought up our future on her own. I always was the one to bring it up. I made it clear that the only reason we don't have future plans is because she doesn't seem to want to make them yet. I also said there is nothing wrong with that, but she needs to let me know if she's not ready for that step. Pointing all of this out to her made her go quiet. Not silent treatment quiet, but when things get too intense for her she just starts to shut down and withdraw. It took a few minutes for her to come out of it. As she did, I explained that I felt that I was the only one really putting effort into our relationship. She asked me what I seriously wanted. I began in a kind of roundabout way, I guess. I explained that 6 years ago, I had to end an engagement to my fiancée after she became an abusive alcoholic, then spent the next few years working 80+ hours a week at a job I hated while watching my dad slowly die. All things she already knows. What I was going to say next is that after going through that, I wanted to get a job that was better for my mental health, succeeded, and I wanted to find my person. Instead, I got cut off. She said that maybe I started dating too soon after my dad's passing. We started dating about 9 months later. This really threw me off. Took me a minute to recover. Before I could continue, she said that she just doesn't feel our communication styles are compatible. I asked her if she seriously thinks she has good communication skills, which she— Mom kicked me out for her new fiancé after Dad died and uninvited me from her wedding. So I reached out to my grandparents. Now she's losing our house and her engagement. So my dad passed away about a year ago after a really long struggle with brain cancer. We knew that he was not going to make it as soon as he had been diagnosed because the doctors had told us that it was a little too late for him. But we still tried our very best to keep the treatments going and he put on a brave face for us, but ultimately, we lost him. He was my best friend ever since I was a kid, and even though I definitely love my mom, I loved him a lot more. After he passed away, I felt like a piece of me had left with him, and I was never going to get that piece back. So naturally, I was quite emotionally affected by his demise, and for the past 1 year, I've been quite lost. I was 16 back then, and recently, I turned 17 and I decided to take a gap year after I graduated high school because I need some time to figure out what I want to do with my life. I'm privileged enough to have that choice since my family has been supportive of my decisions so far, so I'm going to work and figure out what I want to do in the future. Until then, I planned on staying back home since I didn't want to waste money renting an apartment for myself. However, my mother had her boyfriend move in with us a couple months ago, and even though I was not exactly fine with it, I had to pretend like it was not a big deal because I did not want to hurt my mother or question her feelings for my dad. But I found it quite odd that she had started dating this guy just 6 months after my dad had passed away because I thought it was too soon. I even casually brought it up with my mother, and she told me that she missed my dad, but at some point, she would have to move on. And the guy she was dating, she had known him since they were in high school, and they had drifted apart for a bit when he moved away, but had reconnected recently when he had come back here. Apparently, he was the one who had been there for her all along, even when my dad had been diagnosed, and recently, when he had confessed his feelings for her, she decided to go for it because she had really grown to care for him. So after having dated for 3 months, she had him move in with us so we could bond because they were getting married soon. A couple of weeks ago, they got officially engaged, and after the engagement party, my mother told me that she had to speak to me in private, and that was when she told me that once she was married, she would want me to move out since she did not want me to be part of her, and neither did she want me staying with them anymore because she wanted to start afresh, and both she and her partner agreed that this would be for the best. So just to be clear, it has been only a year since my dad passed away, and just 6 months after his demise, my mom started seeing this guy. She told me about it after she had been out for a couple of days with him, and 3 months after that, she had him move in with us. I was fine with that because she was trying to move on and she knew what was best for her. She had also been a good mother to me so far, and when my dad was alive, she had also been a good wife to him. So I had no reason to question her, and I respected her decision, even though I did not necessarily agree with it or think it was a good idea. But I thought that I was too young to know anything, so I kept my mouth shut. Now, it has been almost 3 months since her boyfriend has been living with us, and 4 weeks ago, a few days after they got engaged, she told me that she wanted me to move out by the time they started the preparation for the wedding that was going to be in a couple of months, maybe 5 or 6 at most. I think it would be very obvious to anyone with even half a brain that she was rushing things, and it was completely unnecessary. It was also kind of disrespectful to my dad's memory because it had not been that long since he passed away. Anyway, after she told me that she would want me to move out and wouldn't want me to be a part of her new family, I didn't even know what to tell her. So I just asked her why exactly had she made this decision, because as far as I could recall, she had said that she wanted her fiancé to be living with us so we could get to know each other and bond, which would be good for us because eventually, she planned on marrying him and then we would all be living together. And now, all of a sudden, she wanted me to find a place of my own. It just didn't add up. She did not seem inclined to tell me the real reason, but then, when I kept insisting that I wanted to know, she told me that her fiancé wasn't exactly comfortable with the idea of me continuing to live with them even after they got married because I would be a constant reminder of her previous relationship. The guy had told her that he had apparently been in love with her ever since they were in high school, but had never been able to work up the courage to ask her out, and then they sort of lost touch when they were in college. Eventually, my mom ended up marrying my dad and they didn't speak for many years. But he had always resented my father for being able to get to her first, and now that he was finally out of the way, he didn't want me here. She told me that her fiancé didn't even want me to be invited to the wedding because he thought that it was cold and hateful and I did not approve of their relationship. So, he wanted me out because he thought that I was against their relationship, and he believed that I would prove to be quite toxic if I was at the wedding or even in their lives. I couldn't even believe that she was entertaining this idea, and she told me that she had tried to fight for me, saying that I was just lost and kind of distant from everyone at this point because I still missed my dad, but her fiancé had made up his mind and had given her an ultimatum. She could either choose my side or she could choose him. And very, obviously, she had made her choice, so she was asking me to stay out. She told me that she had talked her fiancé into at least letting me stay until I was able to find a place, but after that, they would require me to leave as soon as the wedding got close. That day was horrible for me because I had a huge fight with my mom, naturally. I told her that she was a coward, and she was incredibly selfish for choosing her fiancé over me. We were shouting at each other, so her fiancé was able to overhear what was going on, and he came to her rescue. And he started accusing me of never even trying to give him a chance and creating a very hostile environment for him ever since he had moved in. I don't think that was true. I just didn't go out of my way to speak to him, and I was only polite to him, but didn't treat him with any extra love or affection. I think that's pretty normal, so I don't even know why he was expecting that because I had just lost my father. I was obviously still trying to process that, and I was not ready to build a relationship with him as my stepdad so soon. Anyway, he started accusing me of being hostile. I told him that he had no right to say anything at all to me because this was my house and he couldn't kick me out. So then, things got much worse and he told me that he could definitely kick me out because it was my mother's choice not to have me here since I was the face of her past mistakes. That comment made me so mad that I ended up attacking him and scratched his face up real bad. My mother had to separate us and then, she told me that she would call the cops if I did not leave, so I packed some of my things and I headed over to my grandparents' place. I went to live with my paternal grandparents because my mom's parents live out of state and I'm not very close with them. Once I was there, I explained the entire situation to them, and they decided to take matters into their own hands. They had already known all about my mother, trying to move on just 6 months after their son had passed away, but just like me, they had not questioned either. They had wanted to respect her wishes and let her live her life the way she wanted to because we were sure that my dad's demise was tough on her as well. All of us had wanted to give this relationship a chance, but she had proven that she was not the same person she had been when my dad was still around. Anyway, once I told my grandparents what had happened, they decided to cut off her funds. Apparently, ever since things got too bad with my dad's health, he had to quit his job and my grandparents were the ones who had been funding everything. My mom works in publishing and has a decent income on her own, but my dad used to be a dentist and quite a well-known one at that. So the kind of lifestyle that we were used to, my mother couldn't maintain that on her own income, and so, my grandparents had been chipping in so that I wouldn't have to make any sacrifices, and I'm incredibly privileged for that. After my father passed away, they continued to support us by sending my mother money, even after she started dating somebody else. They were doing all of this because they did not want me to be uncomfortable and I was still young, so it was my mom taking care of me, so they sent the money to her. They wanted to make sure that she was taken care of because she and my dad had been together for a long time, and my grandparents had genuinely considered her the daughter that they never had. But since I had left home, they decided that they were going to cut off her funds, and that would mean that she would not be able to afford the lavish wedding that she was planning. It was pretty stupid on her part to even kick me out because if she knew that she had been counting on the money that my grandparents had been sending, then she should have at least waited until the wedding had happened to kick me out. I found out about this because the day that I got kicked out, and I told my grandparents everything, they called her up and got into a fight with her, and later on, she messaged me saying that I was the reason she would have to scale her way down, and even her fiancé was upset because he had not known that she had been living off of her in-laws' money so far. He thought that she was able to afford that lifestyle all on her own, and well, let's just say that he had been in for a nasty surprise. But the cherry on top is the fact that nobody knew that even the house that we had been living in was owned and paid for by my grandparents. My dad had never brought it up because he didn't think that it would ever be necessary, but the house had a wedding gift from my grandparents to him. My grandparents had tried to transfer the deed of the house to him, but my dad had declined and said that he wanted my grandparents to retain ownership of the house legally so that if my grandparents ever were in need, they would be able to sell the property in the future. And by then, he hoped to be successful enough to move out on such short notice and not care about it. Had he been alive, he definitely would have been able to do so, so I guess he lived up to that. Anyway, for whatever reason, my dad had made sure that my grandparents retained legal ownership of that house, and now, my mother was upset because she was getting kicked out of the house herself and didn't have a place to play happy family in. And guess what? The best part is that she's blaming me for all of this as if I'm the one who started it. The only thing that I did was complain to my grandparents because I was the one being wrong, and I don't think that was with an intention to take revenge on her. It was just something that happened because I needed somebody to talk to. She screwed herself over, not me. But anyway, she has been sending me messages about how she had been planning on adopting twins because that's what she had always wanted, and after marriage, she and her fiancé were going to apply, but now, they had to rethink everything, and come up with a new plan for their life, and it was all because of me. She said that she has been feeling humiliated since she doesn't know when she's going to get married anymore and has no idea where she's even going to live. And instead of being sorry about any of this, she has been blaming me, saying that the least I could have done for her was at least give her some time like she had done for me. Apparently, she thought that she had fought for me and showed me that she cared, but I didn't do the same for her. She believes that she has been betrayed, and I can't even come up with a single logical train of thought that would explain why my mom thinks that she has been betrayed by me after everything that's happened. She had been trying to call me and stuff, and then I blocked her without any response because I did not think that I owed it to her. After all, she did not think that she owed me an explanation when she decided that she was going to pick her fiancé over me. But blocking her didn't even help. She came up with other ways to contact me and bother me and relentlessly keep sending me messages, reminding me that this was all my fault. It got way too much for me to handle, so I decided to respond to her once and for all and end this. She had been using fake accounts and throwaway email addresses on social media to keep sending me messages, so I decided to respond to one of them, and I told her that this was all her fault and she needed to stop blaming me for it. I told her that I was glad that I had ruined her life, and now, she wasn't sure at what time she was going to get married or where she was going to live or how she was going to adopt the kids that she was planning on adopting with her fiancé. Most of all, I was glad that she wouldn't be able to build a family because just in case she had forgotten, she had already done that once. She already had a family and I was a part of it, but look how she treated me. And if this is her idea of how families should be treated, especially your own children, then I guess it's for the best that she isn't going to get the opportunity to adopt kids anymore. I told her that she wasn't fit to be a mother since she had found it more reasonable to choose her fiancé over me, for no real reason. Then, I even questioned if she had actually been loyal to my dad at all because the speed at which she and her relationship with her fiancé was moving, it was questionable whether she even missed my father. I had tried my best to respect her decisions, but unfortunately, she had proven that she was not worthy of my respect, and now, whatever my grandparents were doing, I was going to stand by and let them handle it because I thought it was the right thing to do. And she would have to look for a place and move out because that's exactly what she had been trying to do to me, and this is just karma hitting her back. I sent this message, and after that, the chaos that has followed, I don't even know what to say about it. Right now, my family is divided because some people think that I said a lot of things that were not necessary, and some people think that my mother deserved it. The only reason the rest of the family was unable to find out about it was because my mom posted the entire exchange on social media, and I guess it was kind of fair. Since she did every single detail, she didn't leave out her own faults, but she also made it seem like I was overreacting and that after having raised me, this was not what she deserved. I'm glad that some people are on my side, but the ones who are with my mother on this, I don't know how to feel about that, since it's not like these people have always been against me. They are my relatives and even they have adored me, but this time, they think that I went too far. So what do you guys think? Ida for telling my mother that I don't think she's fit to be a mother after she chose her fiancé over me? Update 1. Hi, everyone. Thank you to everyone who has responded to my post and commented on it. It means a lot that you guys took out the time to do so. Anyway, coming to what's going on with my family, I think it's better for me not to pay any mind to the people who are not on my side on this one, because I did whatever I thought was appropriate, and my grandparents think that at this stage, it was necessary for me to speak up because my mom doesn't have the right to go out of her way to make me feel guilty for something that was not even my fault and expect me to take it without a word. I stood up for myself and they thought it was the right thing to do. That's all that matters to me. But that's just my paternal grandparents. My mom's parents are obviously on her side here, and they think that I should apologize to her and try to make it all right with her because they think that I have been vindictive and cruel. So I did the only reasonable thing, I blocked them as well, and I'm gonna make sure that they are not able to contact me after this, since if they can't even see their own daughter's faults, I don't think they have any business commenting on mine. It's been a while since I left home, and my grandparents have already stopped sending her money, since there was no formal arrangement. They were just doing it out of the kindness of their heart. And the only thing that's left to do is evict them so I can have the house to myself again. My grandparents have already spoken to their lawyers and have the eviction notice prepared, so my mom is going to be served in a couple of days. Some of you had been asking if my mother had any idea that the house did not actually belong to my father and that it belongs to my grandparents, and well, I don't really know. I don't think she knew, because otherwise she might have gotten him to transfer the property to her. My grandparents handled the property tax, but my dad paid the money, so even if she had been living in that house for a really long time, it didn't matter because she didn't have anything to do with it legally. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to having her evicted so I can have the house to myself again, because I feel like she deserves to be taught a lesson. Dealing with my emotions had been extremely difficult for me for the past year, ever since my father passed away, and she knew that. She had seen me at my lowest and she knew how much I missed him, but still, she went out of her way to make me miserable and chose her fiancé over me, her only child. Also, about her fiancé, I don't even know what's wrong with that guy. I think I had complained about this in my original post as well, but well, I hate him, so I'm gonna complain about it again. I don't know why exactly he just assumed that I did not like him. I was just indifferent to him, and it was not even anything personal. I was just because I was grieving the loss of my father. God forbid he doesn't receive attention from his future stepdaughter for 1 second. And on top of that, he had the audacity to call me a reminder of my mom's past mistakes? I think he has to be the biggest mistake my mom has ever made. I can't imagine anybody being creepy enough to wait for a woman's husband to pass away so he can hit on her, and I can't believe my mother was stupid enough to fall for it. So I don't feel bad for her at all anymore, and I think that she totally deserves it. And anyone who is on her side here, can take a hike and leave me alone forever. I'm gonna keep track of who's siding with her right now, so that in the future, I never interact with these people ever again. It might seem petty and small for me to do so, but I don't even care. This is a big deal for me. The only good thing that has come out of this is that she has stopped sending me messages after I responded to her, so I think it was worth it. She still has that post though, which honestly doesn't even matter to me because I told my relatives not to keep sending it to me and that I didn't care about it at all. She can play the victim all that she wants, it's not gonna change the reality, and it's definitely not gonna change the fact that in a few days, she's going to be served with an eviction notice and then she will have to leave her house. And I personally can't wait for that to happen. Update 2, it happened and I haven't ever been happier. I feel like a bad person for being so happy right now, but I don't care. My mom got served with the eviction notice today and had a total mental breakdown on social media. After she was served, she went live on Facebook and a bunch of my relatives witnessed her completely breaking down. She was sobbing like crazy and I would have felt bad for her if she hadn't actually taken the time to set up the camera and then act dramatic for her audience. She started talking about how she had raised me and my father would have been so disappointed in me today, as if I couldn't say the same thing for her. My mom was acting as if I had an issue with the fact that she was dating again and was trying to move on, which was not even the case. I had an issue with the fact that she was trying to kick me out of the house and make me seem like the bad guy for simply standing up for myself. I didn't even care that she had told me about not being invited to the wedding, but I had an issue with the fact that her fiancé thought that I was toxic and wanted me out of the house that I had lived in with my father. If he had a problem with me, he could leave. And that's the energy that my mother should have had as well, but unfortunately, she thought that giving me time to move out was the more reasonable thing to do here. She had been crying on the floor and beating the floor with her fists. You know how people act in films, and she thought that people were going to sympathize with her, and some people were doing that, but most people were just calling her out on her BS because they knew the entire story. A lot of my relatives who were on my side had screen recorded the entire thing and sent it to me, and I have to say, it's pathetic how she had been acting. I had already been quite embarrassed of how she had been acting for the past couple of weeks, but now I'm downright ashamed of it. I hate the fact that I'm related to her and I'm always going to be known as her daughter because this is just weird and psychotic. Anyway, I'm just happy that even after breaking down on social media and trying to play the victim so badly, it didn't matter because she is still gonna have to vacate the house and be gone by the end of the month. On a more serious note, I hope she sees therapy because it's very obvious to me now that she needs intensive care for her declining mental health, since I literally can't imagine anybody who is normal acting like this. Update 3. Hi, guys. So my mother has moved out, officially. And the house is empty now, so I can move in a couple of days, but I'm gonna wait it out. I have really enjoyed living with my grandparents and I don't want to give up on that so soon. So I'm gonna be staying with them for a few more weeks or maybe even months, I haven't decided yet. Anyway, I have more news about my mother, so apparently she and her fiancé have called off their engagement and have separated. They did not mention any reasons for it on social media, but I have heard from a couple of relatives that she has been telling people that it's because he couldn't handle the fact that she was acting so unstable. I mean, after her recent behavior, I wouldn't blame anybody for leaving her because it has been pretty psychotic. But she has been justifying it all, claiming that it's been happening because she has been having a really tough time coping with her emotions after my father passed away, and even if I do believe that, it just explains her actions, it doesn't excuse them. She has been telling the relatives who had been on her side through this entire thing about what she has been going through, and I really think she needs to reevaluate who she's supposed to about these things because the gossip is spreading and I'm pretty sure that the ones she has chosen to trust other ones who are talking about her behind her back, otherwise I wouldn't have gotten to know about all of these things. Anyway, that's her choice now. To be honest, everything said and done, I do feel kind of bad for her. She is my mother and both of us lost somebody incredibly important to us last year. I don't think my dad would have liked to see us like this, but I can't help it. I really wanted to accept her and make our relationship work, even though she was doing things that I did not approve of. But I don't think she valued the fact that I was trying my very best to accept her and her fiancé, and she decided to go out of her way to change her life, according to her partner. She should have stood her ground and stood up for me instead, and maybe we would be having a nice life now. Instead, she put everything at risk so she could have a new family and a new life and put me in the past. That backfired on her, and now, she doesn't have a daughter, she doesn't have a fiancé, and she doesn't even have her own home because from what I've heard, she has had to move into a really tiny apartment, which is all she could find on such short notice. I feel bad for her, but at the same time, she brought this on herself. I just hope that at some point in the future, she comes to her senses and apologizes. But even if it doesn't happen, I'm fine with it because I have my grandparents by my side and I'm gonna work hard for my future, just like my father wanted me. Husband treats our kids like playmates, ruins their toys, and cried when our daughter said her classmate was her BFF. I'm sorry if this is jumbled or formatted weird. Our most recent fight just happened and I'm still upset, plus I've never posted something this. My 29F, husband 33M, we've been married for 4 years, together for 7. We have 2 kids, daughter 4F, and son 2M, I'm really not sure where to start. My husband is an overgrown child, he just doesn't know when it's time to be serious. This is the only problem in our marriage. He's extremely loving, affectionate, and kind. He loves being a dad. He loves our children more than anything and they love him as well. He is constantly playing with them, and I think this is where issues start to arise. My husband cannot understand when it's time to put playtime on pause. I'm serious when I say he's in playtime mode with our children from the moment they wake up, to the moment they go to sleep. This results in extremely hyperactive children in the morning when I'm trying to get our daughter ready for kindergarten, and it's extremely frustrating to have to struggle to get her fed/cleaned/dressed and out the door on time for school, where he then will drive her to. At night, this results in hyperactive children who can take up to 2 hours to get to settle down and go to bed, and by then it's way past their bedtime and will sometimes wake up grumpy in the morning because they didn't get enough sleep. He will sometimes even be egging our children on at night when we're sitting with them in bed trying to wind them down to sleep. It's incredibly infuriating and I will tell him to stop because I'm clearly trying to get them to sleep and all he's doing is keeping them up. He laughs and says he's just having fun. Husband doesn't do hard discipline. He tells our kids to stop fighting each other or to stop touching fragile objects, but when it comes to timeouts or taking away things like dessert, certain toys, TV time for the day, he all but refuses. He will leave me to be the bad guy and I'm absolutely sick of it. I'm tired of feeling like I'm the mean mom who doesn't like fun or has to ruin their fun, but he just won't do it. I've told him that he needs to stop leaving all the hard discipline up to me, says he will, but then leaves it all up to me again next time. I dread when the kids are older and things like grounding become a thing. My husband is constantly breaking our children's toys because he wants to play with them. He's broken a little kid trampoline we got for them because he wanted to jump and play on it with them. He's broken 2, our daughter and sons, of those toddler-sized motorized cars by sitting on them and riding around with them. I would look out the window and see him riding around on these things having the time of his life, meanwhile our kids are standing on the edge of the yard watching him and waiting for their turn. He's broken a little kid basketball hoop by pretending to be on a pro basketball team and doing dunks, which bend and break the actual hoop. Our daughter's birthday was last month, and one of our friends bought her a little scooter. My husband broke it within a week because he wouldn't stop playing and doing tricks on it every time he stepped outside the house for something. Our daughter was devastated because she loved that thing, even more so because she loves our friend who gave it to her, so to her it was extra special. I also feel terrible that this toy my friend spent her money in was destroyed by my husband before my daughter barely got any play time on it. Now, my husband is 6 foot and about 20 pounds overweight. He has absolutely no business playing on these children's toys, and I've told him time and time again to stop playing on them because they aren't made for a person his size, and that he will break them. And then he does. And he'll sheepishly carry the broken toy into me and say sorry, but then he's back at it again, destroying another toy shortly after. We got our daughter a bike for Christmas so she can start learning, and I don't even want to give it to her because I know he'll ruin it for her like he always does with her toys. These are just some of the bigger broken toy examples. There are also countless smaller things of theirs he's broken, like balls, dolls, little cars, a doll house, a slide, ect. He's always making our kids play with him, even when they clearly don't want to or just want to chill out / relax and sit and watch a movie. This mostly applies to our son, who is much more introverted / sensitive than our daughter and usually prefers calm and quiet interaction over the loud and hyperactive playtime my husband always does. A handful of times he has frustrated / overwhelmed our son by continuously pushing son to play with him, resulting in son to start to cry because he just wants to be left alone. Now finally on to what prompted me to post here. My husband is always telling our kids, and everyone else, that our kids are his best friends. Since our daughter started learning to talk, he's trained her to answer the question, "Who's your best friend?" with Daddy. Our son is in early talking stages and he is starting to train him do this as well. At first I didn't see any issues with this, and actually thought it was cute. But our daughter has made a really good friend 5F, I'll call her Emily, at school this year. Daughter is always talking about Emily and asking if Emily can come over / daughter can go to Emily's house. Today my husband asked our daughter, "Who's your best friend?" And our daughter paused for a moment, got a huge grin on her face and said Emily. And it looked like my husband had just been given the worst news of his entire life. He asked her what? And our daughter started giggling and said Emily. Again, and my husband said no, who's your best friend? And again, still giggling, she says Emily. My husband's face went blank and immediately removed himself from her and went into the other room. Our daughter seemed a little confused, but mostly undisturbed, and went back to watching cartoons. I followed him and asked him what was wrong, and when he starts talking I realize he's beginning to cry. He tells me that he's supposed to be our daughter's best friend and that he can't believe she would toss him aside like that. Now up until now, like I said, I thought this best friend thing was cute. I never realized exactly how serious my husband took this. If I had, I would have tried to put a stop to it early on. But then again, how exactly can you tell your husband to stop calling his kids his best friends? Anyway, I was a bit shocked at this point, and I admit I didn't use as much tact in my response as I probably could have, and ask him if he's serious. He says of course I am, and I tell him that he's the parent. He's not supposed to be a best friend to his kids. He's supposed to be the parent. And that he's 29 years older than our daughter. Of course she's going to eventually make friends her own age and start considering them her best friends. He tells me I don't understand, and I told him he was being ridiculous and childish. He looks at me as if I just slapped him and tells me I'm being heartless and accuses me of not wanting him to have a good relationship with our kids and leaves the house early to go to work. I have no idea what to do. I almost feel ridiculous, because how can someone have an issue with their husband loving their kids? I feel insane, and I haven't been able to talk to any friends about this because I feel like they'll all be, "So you're mad at your husband for playing with your kids? What's wrong with you?" But I just don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to address these issues with my husband in a way he'll understand, so he'll start being reasonable about them. I also feel extremely anxious about everything now, because my husband and I have been trying for the last 2 months to conceive another baby, and now I don't want to bring another child into the world without having this mess sorted out. But I know telling my husband I want to wait on this third child will devastate him. Edit. Since it's being asked a few times, I'm just going to put this here instead of typing the same comment over and over. My husband's relationship with his parents growing up was, in his words, great. He has 3 siblings, all successful adults, and his parents' interaction with our kids now give no indication that they are the reason my husband doesn't seem able to grasp parenting himself. Update. A few things first, I just want to thank everyone who commented on my op. I got overwhelmed with the amount of responses while on mobile, had no computer when I posted, and stopped replying, but I read every single comment and story. I've received a few PMs asking for an update, and I'm sorry it's so late. This update would be extremely long if I typed every single detail, and still is kinda long, whoops, so I'm gonna try and condense it. So, I sat my husband down the night he got home from work after posting my op, and we had a long talk. Again, this would be incredibly long if I wrote all the details, so I'm gonna summarize and go in the order of my points I made in my op. Keep in mind, our talk didn't follow the order of my post, so I'm sorry if anything seems confusing, since it would have been discussed out of order, on not knowing when to pause playtime. I told him that I know he loves playing with the kids, and I love that he loves playing with the kids, but that I really need him to work with me during bedtime. I also once again pointed out that their lack of sleep is making them grumpy and harder to manage in the mornings, and that they're growing and need their sleep. He's had a couple slip-ups since, but he's cooled it down around bedtime now and makes more of an effort to help me with bedtime. He started reading to them instead. I used it to it, and is 20 times better than me at it because they love the funny voices he gives the characters. On discipline, I told him it's not fair of him to constantly make me feel like the bad guy. And that no parent likes disciplining their kids, but they need it to learn and grow into good adults, and that I need him to be united with me on punishments. He's having a little trouble with this one, but has been trying more. Which I appreciate. On breaking their toys, I, again, told him that I know he loves playing with our kids, but he needs to stop destroying their things. That not only is it upsetting them, but it's causing us to needlessly spending extra money to replace things that we don't need to be. I took this part of the talk to suggest we finally get a full-size trampoline like we had been talking about for a little while, and that he should dig out his bike from the garage so he can ride with our daughter when she learns. We're both probably more excited about the trampoline than the kids lol. We talked more about this topic, but these are the most relevant points. He realized he goes a little too far after I described the scene I wrote about in my op, with him riding around on their little cars while the kids are standing on the sidelines. I'm also happy to report he has stayed off our daughter's new bike. On making the kids play when they don't want to, he agreed that it wasn't cool of him to push just because he wants to play. I told him our kids are people, and just because they're kids, doesn't mean they don't deserve to have their boundaries respected or time to themselves. And now on to the best friend thing. This was the first thing we discussed. Long story short, he was feeling hurt and generally having a little trouble accepting our daughter was growing up. This is really the first big thing she's done or said to show that she is, in fact, growing up. And he just wasn't expecting it and handling it very poorly, which he knew he did. I took a line from a comment on my op and told him our children will have lots of best friends in their lifetime, but he will always be their only dad. This visibly comforted him, so thank you to whoever it was who wrote that. I took a suggestion from someone on the op, and suggested that he call up his own parents and ask them for advice on how they handled watching 4 kids grow up and leave the nest. He really liked this idea and has since done so. I also showed him stories commenters on my op shared about their relationship with their parents growing up. I told him that I'm not showing him them because I think he's going to become like those parents, but that I think it's important he see the children's side of things. These stories hit him pretty hard, which led into this, so I left something out of my op that I didn't realize was relevant. Lots of people asked how my husband's relationship with his parents was growing up, and I answered that it was great. However, my own relationship with my parents was horrible. Long story short, I don't get along with nor even like my parents, and I see/talk to them maybe once a year. Growing up was miserable, to say the least. And it affected me for quite a long time where I was a huge ball of anger and resentment because of the way my parents treated me. I told my husband about all of this a few months after we started dating, so he was aware of everything from the start. My husband told me he told himself he would be the best dad he could be, because he wanted our kids to have the childhood he knew I wanted, and wanted for them. Now, I started crying here and was a bit of a mess for a few minutes lol. It was honestly one of the most touching things anyone has ever said to me. I told him he is the best dad, and that I love him so much for it. Finding out that this was essentially the root of everything, it was a lot easier to continue on with the rest of my points. Everything has been great since. He really listened to what I was saying this time, and has made a big effort to help me out more while also cooling it a bit with the kids. Him and our daughter have been riding around on their bikes together every weekend. I've also started learning how to ride so I can eventually join. Again, I want to thank everyone for commenting on my op and helping me gather my thoughts. I thought a few things said about my husband were a bit extreme, but I realized that's something that happens when people give advice on a situation they only have so much info on. Husband wanted a baby to fix our marriage while cheating on me, so I left and filed for divorce, but he and his family are blowing up my phone and begging me to come back. My husband, Theo, and I have been together for 5 years and married for 3. Theo and I met in college and we started dating in our final semester, and since then, we had been together. We have had a fairly normal relationship with ups and downs like any other couple. Recently, after our 3rd marriage anniversary, he told me that he wanted to start trying for a baby because he thought that it was the right time to start a family. And he was right. We were both in pretty great places career-wise and we're in our mid-20s and have already been together for quite a long time, so it's a pretty good time to have a baby. I agreed, and after trying for a couple of months, I finally got pregnant 2 months ago. I was overjoyed and he seemed happy as well, but it wasn't until a week ago that I found out that it was all for show. Until now, the only people who know about the pregnancy are our families and a couple of close friends, but we haven't made any announcement yet. So last week, when I saw a notification on his phone from a coworker, asking if he was really fine with a pregnancy, it caught my interest. Because Theo himself had told me that he wanted to keep the pregnancy under wraps for a couple of months, so I didn't know why he had spoken to his coworker about it. And he was on his phone when he received that message, so I could have just asked him about it, but I had a gut feeling that he wouldn't tell me the truth. So later that night, I decided to go through his phone. I had to snoop because it was just my gut feeling that told me that I confronted him about it. I was never going to get a straight answer and he might even delete all the messages, so I never would have been able to find out either. And I'm so glad that I decided to go through his phone secretly instead of just confronting him because of the things that I found in that conversation with his coworker. I'm pretty sure he never would have confessed to it himself if I didn't already know the truth. I had to scroll up quite a lot to find out the context, but here's the deal. Theo had been talking to one of his coworkers about a new employee who had joined recently, and they had become quite close friends since he had been training her. Let's call this woman Natasha, and Natasha happens to be quite attractive, since I met her at a party and I did not suspect anything off because my husband's behavior with her had been quite cordial at the party. They seemed to be good friends and nothing more, so I had no reason to doubt him. But after reading the texts he had sent his friend from work, realized that he was just putting on a front so that I wouldn't suspect anything, but in reality, he was quite attracted to her and he had talked about it to his friend in detail. It was quite gross because he had said things like he couldn't stop thinking about her, even when he was with me, and even though they hadn't exactly done anything yet, he had confessed that he wouldn't be against the idea if she tried to make a move on him. And if you think that that's the worst thing that he could have said, it actually gets even worse. He had also spoken about how he had started to find me very irritating and I had been getting on his nerves recently. In comparison, the time that he spent with Natasha seemed to be a lot more pleasant for him, so much so that he would end up finding himself waiting to go back to work every time that he would come back home to me, and he didn't feel like speaking to me at all, but he had to because I was pregnant and he didn't want me to suspect anything. He had said that he hated even having to sleep in the same bed with me, but he had no other option. His coworker has been trying to reason with him and had called him out on his strange behavior because it was really wrong of him to be leading me on like this, especially when he knew that he had started to lose feelings for me. The worst part was that Natasha had joined their workplace about 8 months ago, and I knew that because he had told me about how he had to help train a new employee and how annoying it was for him around that time. And if I'm not wrong, we celebrated our wedding anniversary 2 months after Natasha joined. So by the time that he had suggested the idea of starting a family, Natasha had already become a part of his life and they had been friends at the time. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why he would suggest starting a family with me if he had started to lose feelings. He could have still changed his mind a few months after our anniversary, but he continued to actively try having a baby with me, and all the while, he was falling out of love with me. It was a betrayal of the highest degree, and I just couldn't figure out why he would do something like this to me. That night, I spent half of the night reading the messages and scrolling up as much as I could, and after I had read everything, I just kept his phone beside him and tried to go to sleep on the couch because I couldn't stand to lie beside him. But I couldn't bring myself to go to sleep, no matter how hard I tried, and when he woke up in the morning, he was quite shocked to see me on the couch. I was honestly in a daze, but when he came to me and hugged me in the morning, I was so disgusted that I ended up pushing him away, and I immediately told him that he didn't have to act like he was in love with me anymore because I knew about Natasha. I had read all the messages that he had been sending to his coworker, and now, I was going to leave him. When I pushed him away, he seemed surprised, but my worst fears were confirmed when he did not even try to deny any of it. He just kept looking at the floor after my outburst, and that was even more frustrating for me because the least he could do was at least give me some answers. I had spent the entire night thinking about what I would say to him, but honestly, when I had the opportunity, I couldn't do anything but just cry on the couch beside him. Because unlike him, I was still in love with him and I wanted to make things work, but it was clear to me that it wouldn't be possible because I didn't think that he wanted to make it work. After crying for a good couple of minutes, I just asked him why he had decided to have a baby with me, especially when he knew that he was falling out of love with me. Because I knew for a fact that by the time he had suggested starting a family, he had already started developing feelings for Natasha. And finally, that got him to talk, and he told me that he had suggested having a baby with me because he thought that this was just a phase and it would become easier for him to feel reconnected to me again once we had something to bond over, like a baby. So basically, he had thought that having a baby was going to solve everything. But unfortunately, it hadn't solved anything. He had still continued to fall out of love with me and he was falling for Natasha instead. I don't know if it was or if he was infatuated with her because he was bored with our marriage, but all I knew was that he did not love me anymore. And because of him, I was not pregnant with the baby of a man who did not even love me, and it was just heartbreaking. After he told me that, he started to apologize to me, but I didn't even want to hear it. At that point, all I wanted to do was get away from him, so I packed a few of my things and left. He kept apologizing but did not try to stop me, so I ended up going to my parents' place, and once I was there, I finally just had a complete meltdown. I told them everything about what I had found on his phone, what he had said, and I told them that I did not want to go back to him. My dad was furious, but he kept his temper under control and he told me that I was going to be living with them now and whatever I needed to be brought back from my place, he would get it for me, but I didn't have to go back to see him again. My mother called up my uncle who has a law firm and asked him to put me in touch with a competent divorce attorney as quickly as he could so we could start the legal proceedings because there was no going back after this. I had the good sense to take a couple of screenshots of the conversation between him and his coworker, and just for good measure, I'd even taken a couple of screenshots of his conversation with Natasha. Although I have to admit, his conversation with his coworker was a lot more incriminating than his chats with Natasha because even though he would flirt with her occasionally, and she would flirt back, they never took it too far and mostly talked about work, but there's no telling what they got up to in person. Either way, I was not mad about whatever had or had not happened with Natasha. I was upset because he had actually said that he wouldn't be against the idea of cheating on me if Natasha wanted to make a move on him, and I didn't even care if it was a hypothetical situation. It was bad enough that he was even considering it. For me, that was as good as actually cheating on me, and let's not forget the fact that he had also talked a bunch of crap about me, like how he had started to find me annoying and how he had been pretending to be in love with me, and suggested that we have a baby because he thought that would be the solution to all our problems. Basically, everything that he had done was unforgivable, and I had no intention of going back to him. But neither did I have any intention of giving up the baby or terminating my pregnancy, just because the dad had turned out to be a jerk. I was ready to be a mother, with or without a husband. So along with a divorce, I also decided that I was going to file for full custody of my child, at least until my baby was old enough to be left alone with his father. Worst comes to worse, I would agree to visiting rights, but there was no way that I was going to let him have partial custody. And these are the terms that I told my divorce lawyer so he could start the process, prepare the paperwork, and file for the divorce and custody of my child. If you asked me, I thought I had been more than fair because it's not like I had asked for any alimony since I was also a working woman, and I made the same kind of money that he did. Neither did I ask for any settlement money, I just wanted a fair and equal division of all our joint assets. The only thing that I was demanding was child support because whether he liked it or not, it had been his idea to have a baby, even though he had already fallen out of love with me at that point, and it was just a last-ditch attempt by him to find a point of commonality so we could still be together because he was too much of a coward to be honest with me and himself. He definitely owed me child support, and in my opinion, the terms of the divorce were completely fair. I had blocked him the day that I left home, and within a couple of days of that, he had been served. That had been around 2 days ago, and since then, his family has been blowing up my phone with calls and texts, begging me to come back. I guess by now, both his parents and his siblings have found out what he had been up to. Strangely enough, he told them what had really happened, and even more strangely, they think that it's still reasonable enough to ask me to come back to him. I haven't answered a single phone call from his family, but they still keep texting me relentlessly, from several social media accounts, since I started blocking them. They believe that he and I can still make it work because even though he had been thinking about somebody else, it's not like he had actually done anything. And until he actually physically acts on his thoughts, it's no harm done. I don't think they understand the concept of emotional cheating, but it's not my responsibility to explain it to them, so I haven't said anything about it. I know, for a fact that no matter how hard they try to convince me, it's not going to work and I'm definitely not going back to him. But the only reason that I'm here right now, doubting myself, is because they think that, even if I don't come back to him, it's still unfair of me to demand full custody of the child because he wants to be a father as well and the child is not mine to claim, the baby has his genes as well. So even if I don't come back for the sake of our marriage, the least I can do is at least entertain the idea of partial custody because he deserves it. And right now, I'm in a dilemma about whether I should actually consider it or not, or whether I should stick to my demand for full custody. So Ida for demanding full custody of my future kid because my husband had been emotionally cheating on me with a coworker? Update 1. Hi. So I have spoken to my parents about what my in-laws have been saying and they have told me that it's my body, my baby, and at the end of the day, it has to be my decision what I want to do. Besides, it's Theo, who screwed up, not me, so if somebody has to make any sacrifices, it has to be him. If they want to contest my decision for full custody, they are definitely free to do so. I'm not going to stop them or try to argue with them, but it has to be fought out in court. And I'm not going to allow them to make me feel guilty about what my gut says. I believe that it would be better for the baby to spend the initial few years only with me and I don't think that at the moment, I will be fine with co-parenting my child with Theo. I absolutely hate him right now and I can't even stand the sight of him, so co-parenting is out of the question and that's why I've decided that I want full custody. But of course, we are going to have to speak to a mediator first and if we are not able to come to a conclusion there, this is going to go to family court. I think that's the only fair way of deciding what's right. I think they should let the legal proceedings take their course and then, we'll see what happens. That's what I texted them, so they would stop bothering me relentlessly. Because honestly, his parents and his siblings, his 2 older sisters, have no business telling me what's right for my baby and what's not. I had a normal civil relationship with his family for so long, but if they are going to pretend I am the bad guy for wanting to leave him, I don't want anything to do with them. And I definitely don't need advice about marriage or kids from them because they decided to support Theo. They have been trying to convince me that what he ordered was not all that bad because at least he did not actually cheat on me. Like I said, it's not my responsibility to explain to them that emotional cheating is still cheating and honestly, I'm just too exhausted from having to deal with all of this to speak to them about these things as well. I just want them all to leave me alone, if I'm being honest, and the only reason that I responded to them with my message. I also told them that the way they have been harassing me online by texting me constantly from various accounts, even after they have been blocked, only reflects badly on them when this goes to family court because I'm definitely going to be bringing it up. I don't know if it's going to stop them from texting me again and again because it's only been a couple of hours since I sent that message but I'm really hoping that it does because it's already very difficult for me to cope with what's going on, especially since I'm pregnant. I definitely don't need more trouble on my plate from his end right now. Neither he nor his lawyer has responded to our petition yet, so I guess it's going to take time. If they just had to agree with whatever our terms were, they probably would have responded sooner but now I'm guessing that they don't agree. I've been very stressed out about all of this, but I'm really happy to have my family by my side. So far, only a couple of people knew about the pregnancy and I'm going to keep it that way because the last thing that I need right now is a bunch of people texting me and trying to talk to me. Only my parents and my close friends know what's going on in my life regarding Theo and they have all been there for me to the best of their abilities. It has been a little over a week since I left home and a couple of days ago, I told my dad that I wanted to go back to bring everything that I had left and wasn't able to pack before I left. But true to his words, he told me that I didn't need to go back and see Theo, he was going to get it all done for me. So he and a couple of my friends went over to Theo's place this weekend since we knew that he was going to be home. They managed to get all the stuff back to me without any trouble, and my friends told me that Theo steered clear of them the entire time they were there, as if he was scared of what they were going to say or how they were going to behave with him. Lucky for him, my dad and my friends did not even acknowledge his existence while they were there. They were only there to collect my things, and once that was done, they left. I asked my friends if he had been acting any differently because it was really curious to know how this was affecting him and they told me that he had only been around them for a couple of minutes and he just seemed tired. Apparently, it was very clear from the way he had completely given up on his appearance that he was not doing great right now. He had bags under his eyes and he hadn't shaved for quite a couple of days. Having been with him for almost 5 years, I know that he takes great care of his appearance so I know that he is not doing well. And I don't know how to feel about it, but I'm trying not to think about it at all because it's only going to hurt me. Whatever has happened cannot be undone, and I have to look out for the future now. Update 2. So Theo and his lawyer finally responded to her petition and surprisingly, they are not only contesting my demand for full custody of our child, but they are also contesting the divorce itself as well. I will be honest, I definitely expected him to contest the custody but I really didn't think there was any reason for him to contest the divorce. After all, I thought that that's what both of us wanted. He had started to fall out of love with me and had even claimed that if Natasha tried to start something with him, he would be open to it. Obviously that meant that he was no longer interested in being with me anymore, and after being betrayed like this, I was not feeling very inclined to continue our marriage either. So if neither of us wanted to be with each other, that obviously meant that the only way out was getting a divorce. I thought it was a relatively straightforward solution, but I don't think that's what he wants. I know that he's not doing this because he's still in love with me, he's definitely doing this because he wants it to be easier to get custody of his child. It was probably his family's, because if he had still been in love with me, he would have at least tried to contact me or to apologize. I'm not saying that I would have accepted or I would have gone back to him, but that's literally the least that he could have done. And honestly, contesting the divorce is just going to be a waste of both our time, because I don't think there is any court in the world that is going to be able to force me to stay with him, and I don't think that's how it works either. All it is going to achieve is just making the process of getting a divorce longer and more expensive, and I don't know what he's hoping to gain from that, but I can assure everyone that it's not going to work. I've already spoken to my lawyer, and he thinks that the most that he can get out of this is a couple of mediation sessions and maybe couples counseling at most, but if I stand my ground and make it clear that I don't want to go back to him, then we will have to be granted the divorce. And to top it off, I also have proof of him wanting to cheat on me, so I don't know what he's been thinking. Anyway, they had taken me by surprise, but I'm prepared to fight now. Both for getting the divorce that I want and also for full custody of my child. I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that everything works out in my favor, and I don't care how long it takes, but I'm definitely going to try my best to make sure that it does. Update 3. So it's been almost 1 month since I left home, and we have already started our mediation sessions. We have a court-appointed mediator, and we are going to first try to sort things out here, and in case it doesn't work out, which I'm trying to ensure it doesn't, we are going to head to family court. In my honest opinion, I think that's the only way to deal with this, because mediation is just a waste of time. Mediation is for people who think they have a shot at coming to a common ground and avoiding court, but I really don't think that is going to work out for me and Theo. It's very obvious that we want very different things, like he wants to cheat on me and I want a happy and healthy marriage. See, it just doesn't work out because we are so different. Anyway, things have been hard because I've had to see him in person a couple of times now, and it's difficult for me because the pregnancy has been messing up my hormones, and every time that I see him or think about him, I just feel like breaking down. So it's been very difficult for me to hold myself together, especially when I have to sit through the mediation sessions and stare at his stupid face. I've tried my best to keep my cool because that's what my lawyer has advised me, and that's what I've been sticking to. He would try to avoid even looking at me during the first couple of sessions, and that suited me just fine, but recently, he had started trying to at least talk to me, but then we had to terminate those sessions early because I didn't want him to address immediately, and I only wanted him to speak to me through my lawyer. The last time that we had a mediation session, a couple of days ago, he kept quiet throughout the session, and yet another day was wasted. But while I was leaving, he stopped me in my tracks and told me that he wanted to speak to me in person. I tried to dodge him and leave, but he just kept standing in my way and told me that he just wanted to apologize for everything and that he really didn't want things to end this way. It was just exasperating, so I told him that if he really was apologetic for everything, then he could show me that he was sorry by accepting my terms of the divorce and the custody arrangement and leaving me alone. That's the only way that I would accept his apology, and if he wasn't ready to do that, then he should at least just let this go to court instead of wasting my time and money. Then, I pushed him aside and I went back to my car, and I made sure to mention what just happened to my lawyer as well. A few days have passed since then, and today, my lawyer told me that he had received an email from Theo, saying that he was ready to accept the terms of the divorce, but he wanted partial custody of our child when our baby was born. So now, I'm gonna have to think about what I want and decide if that's a deal worth my time or not. But I'm glad that at least he has put this option on the table, because I'm sick of fighting. I just want to be done with this. So who knows, maybe this is a good thing. Update 4. Hi, it's been a few weeks since I last posted, and I've been quite busy since I've gotten along, and there were a few complications regarding the pregnancy, but they're all sorted out now. Anyway, my lawyer and I decided that we were going to agree to his terms. He gets partial custody and we go through with the divorce. So that's why we have decided, and we have communicated to his lawyer as well, so all that's left is for the divorce to be finalized and all the paperwork to be done. Then, we stick to the arrangement that we have decided. It's a fair enough deal, and honestly, I just wanted everything to be over. He reached out to me shortly after my lawyer contacted him and told him that I was willing to agree to his terms and send me an email, thanking me for everything. Once again, he apologized for putting me through all of this, but that doesn't really mean anything to me anymore. I'm just glad that I can move on with my life now and I don't have to have anything to do with him anymore. It's going to hurt, but I'm strong enough, I can deal with it. And I have my parents and my friends by my side, so I'll be fine. Update 5. Hi. So it's been a little over 6 months since I last posted an update here, and it's about time that I fill you guys in on what's been going on. Last week, I gave birth to my beautiful daughter, and my life has suddenly become all about her now, and I couldn't be happier about it. Theo really stepped up as a father and tried to be there for me as much as he could, and since we were going to have to stick to a co-parenting agreement, we tried to be civil to each other. We don't talk about anything apart from our daughter, and that's fine with me. I have started my healing process and I'm trying to move on from him. I think I'm almost there, to be honest, because nowadays, when I see him, I don't really feel anything. From what I know, he has started dating Natasha, probably after the divorce was finalized. Good for him, I guess. Right now, dating is off the table for me. I just want to be a good mother to my daughter, and I'm completely devoted to that one job. Theo and I are still trying to figure out a way to make sure that both of us get equal time with her, but until then, he's going to have to keep visiting me at my parents' place if he wants to see his daughter. My parents have been kind enough to open up their home to him and his family because all of them want to see her, and we are all trying to keep it civil, for her sake. Hopefully, someday in the future, things will be okay, but for now, this is good.